Okay, welcome to the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County work session on Tuesday, May 12th, 2015. The first thing on our agenda is a budget supplemental for communications site manager and various things. John Lloyd?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an unusual budget supplemental request in that it saves money, it doesn't spend more money. That's the bottom line. It's fairly technically detailed about how we arrived at saving money. But the bottom line issue is that these are both matters of public safety. The communication site manager will oversee public safety land radio, the translator authority, as well as the soon-to-be built-out internet broadband capability. The reason for the need for one person in charge of all these projects is that there are very many projects. Right now we have over 9 projects looking at over $3 million, and if we do the full migration to the state 800 megahertz system, we're talking $5 or $6 million. So it's very critical that we have a strong managerial hand on top of all of the various construction projects that are ongoing. The other item is an addressing and public safety GIS position. Addressing, as you know, is the heart and core of E911. If you have the right address, you get the correct dispatch. If you have the wrong address, you're exposed to loss of life, loss of property, and there's always a possibility of some liability on the county side. The addressing function has been overseen by 4 different organizations in the last 10 years, and none of those organizations were properly funded to do real-world, first-class, I guess the best possible addressing. Right now we have a current backlog of over 150 properties whose addresses need to be fixed. And this is starting the busy construction season. People can't get all their plans completed until they have an address. So we have a lot of issues to work through in terms of getting the addressing work done. Ultimately, that's a side benefit. The real benefit, again, is to the emergency dispatch. But with that, we can talk about the numbers. Connie is the magician that put it all together, and I'll turn it over to Connie for that, and we can come back and have generalized questions.
So this does get complicated with the numbers because it crosses over a number of different funds and departments and also into a cost center. So the proposal for the communication site manager is 2/3 of the salary would be paid out of the translator fund and 1/3 out of the radio cost center fund. The translator part is fairly straightforward. It's just paid out of that fund. The radio cost center, however, allocates out its costs to other departments and entities that use it. A larger percentage of that does go to dispatch, which is one of the heavier users of the radio cost center. And then dispatch, in turn, is funded by, apart from Pickens County, the other public safety entities. And so there's a piece that flows through to public safety entities. And so the reason the numbers on the last page are so complicated are just trying to reflect all of the different ways as the money flows through and gets allocated out from the radio cost center into dispatch, into other county funds, and then on to some of the costs to the public safety entities. Also, the public safety GIS addressing position, part of the cost is in the GIS department and part is in dispatch, because dispatch is where the public safety technology cost, 44% goes there. So again, it's just flowing through all of the different ramifications of where these positions are budgeted. On the savings side, we have 2 public safety technology positions currently that will be going away. These are changing. We will have our company ProVelocity taking on the public safety part of technology and then be able to eliminate these 2 positions and replace them with the GIS addressing position. We're also making a few line item reductions in the radio cost center fund and also for engineering in the translator fund. Can I answer more specific
George?
questions on the
So
funding?
the communication site manager position, is that contractual right now?
It does not exist right now. One of the things that I guess in a sense you could say it's contractual,
Or is it the
George, in
translate?
that we've got a contracted engineer
Yeah.
that provides services, engineering and support services. And so that is part of, when you look at the engineering line, that is being reduced as part of this. That position is, such as it was, never really had responsibility or accountability for all the various functions that take place on the mountaintops. And so when we came to you, I think it's 2 weeks ago now, when we talked about the radio system and the switch to the 800 megahertz and had a discussion about governance and how we might realign our resources to have better oversight of these mountaintop sites, engineering to help us ensure that we can begin to eliminate single points of failure and bring together the various efforts that we have, being the radio communications for emergencies, the translator system, and hopefully in the near future broadband. We see all of these are going to have radio frequency components that will impact our mountaintop sites. This is a way to have a mountaintop manager to be responsible for managing our infrastructure to all of those components. So in a sense it's contracted out, but George, we don't contract out that scope of responsibility, and that's been part of our problem.
Okay, thanks.
Rachel?
Yeah, a couple of questions, or perhaps more comments. The public safety GIS addressing position, we went through some very lengthy discussions with ComDev and Cindy Hubin about how that would occur and when it would occur and how people would be notified and how to bring that into greater compliance, because some people are very attached to their street number, even though it's a very confusing street number for emergency services. And so I am comfortable moving this forward, but I would like to make sure that that previous work and those previous discussion about how it should unfold and when it should unfold and everything is critically important, because we had quite a few members of the public here who were upset about, investments they'd already made in street signs and numbers and why and when they would have to change. So I as it's implemented, I guess I'd like to make sure it comes back to us with some further discussion and check in about how that's going to be done. The other is the Pro Velocity moving to the public safety support position. I'd just like to vet that they have the experience and they have the certification with those types of programs, as opposed to just the operational things they're doing in-house.
Yes, they provide those services all across the western region.
Okay, I just want to have that on the record.
To your first point, we will be bringing back probably by the end of June an updated addressing ordinance for your review and approval.
Okay.
We're going to trim some of the vestigial appendages and sort of smooth the business process, while keeping in mind that there's been a lot of work done on this, and that's how the ordinance first was generated.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing that.
I think it'd be well worth reviewing the minutes and the discussion that was had around that. And then I guess the last is back over to your other page 2, and I think I'm reading it right now, but when it talks about upcoming projects, the land radio operational improvements, the estimate is the $985,000. That's not an estimate for a radio study.
No.
Okay, I kind of read that wrong this morning when I was going through my coffee, and I was like, okay.
That's a big study.
That's a big study, so I just wanted to make sure that is the estimate coming from the study.
From the study, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Good point.
Okay. Michael?
So, look, I'm with Rachel on this, on the addressing. I'm cautious about it. I'm concerned about it because we had so much thorough dialogue about it and community concern about it. Tell me how this works now.
It doesn't.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No, tell me how, going forward, if we approve GIS, this GIS appropriation, what's gonna happen?
So there's probably two discussions. The discussion that you guys are referring back to is when we went through the ordinance discussion and how the rules were going to be structured and how we had kind of two levels of addressing changes. Were those immediate public safety concerns, which was a smaller number.
There were duplications.
Duplications and those sorts
that
of
was gonna
things.
change.
And-
And there was some rules for new addresses and necessities.
Correct. So on the ordinance side, none of that is going to change, in terms of the rules and processes that you established, save them coming back to you guys and making those changes. When you approved that ordinance, there was also a shift of responsibility for administering the ordinance from community development to communications, to 911 communications. And so what we're really talking about with this supplemental request is how we'll be administering the ordinance, either how it stands or as you might amend it in the future. And so what happened is when we shifted it to 911, the idea was that kind of gave us a central location where the emergency dispatch could help prioritize and make the changes and vet the changes to the addressing system that would go into their CAD files that they dispatch from. The fact is we're having difficulty just keeping staffing levels to the point where we can maintain dispatch right now, and those addressing changes have not been occurring. They just have not happened. We haven't been able to administer them. At the time we made that shift in responsibility, we didn't have our own IT or GIS functions. We were contracting them, but we hadn't really integrated those functions in the organization. And so as we are looking at the two public safety positions and the opportunities we've had to work with our contractor and to maybe shift resources around, we identified the mountaintop manager, addressing and the remaining public safety support items as areas that we just weren't administering as well as we needed to. And so, Michael, I guess this is a long-winded answer saying what we're really doing is shifting the administrative function of that ordinance. So this isn't changing the ordinance, it's not changing the rules, it's trying to create a more robust resource who will be responsible for implementing that ordinance, because we haven't had an opportunity to even make those public safety changes, a lot of those duplication changes that we talked to you about since we've shifted it to 911. And so right now, as the shift would occur, it would be administering the ordinance that you passed. As John indicated, I think there are some items that staff would like to bring back to the board to consider amending, and in that case, then we'll have a more robust way to administer those changes. So it's really just identifying a resource that's dedicated to doing it. That should have been my short answer to you.
No, that's good. I appreciate the answer. I appreciate it, and it sounds like a better use of our own resources. Now that we've rearranged our resources, it sounds good.
I was trying to figure out what different positions we're actually getting. Is this, they both say half year for the site manager and the GIS addressing position. So by half year, does that mean they're working half-time during the whole year?
No, that's just for 2015.
Oh, for the rest of this year?
Right.
Okay.
By the time they're advertised and hired, we would probably be into June or about halfway through the year. So we prorated the budget adjustment for 2015, but we did carry out the costs so we can see the effect on the 5-year plan. And in 2016, in our own analysis, we put the full cost of those positions along with the savings and all of the changes that are being made. And that's where, under the fiscal impact section, I mentioned that there will be savings going forward in the out years in the 5-year plan. And that's where we came up with that.
Okay, but it will be 2 different people working full-time year-round.
That's correct.
When we get people filling those positions.
And
Okay.
that full year savings then goes from the $20,000 for the partial year to $42,000 in savings in 2016 carried out in our 5-year plan. So it's actually, we did a little bit better than bringing you something that's budget neutral and FTE neutral to try and solve these problems.
Okay. Well, I think, we can save some money, and it sounds like things will be operating better as a result, too, so.
It will be.
Do we have a nod from everyone then?
Nod.
Thumbs up?
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, preparation for the May 26th joint meeting with Basalt and Eagle County.
Yeah, this is going to be, I guess, a little bit unique in that we have not met with all these bodies together before, and Basalt has really taken lead on bringing the Eagle County Commissioners and inviting the Pickens County Commissioners together with Basalt's town board to do a joint meeting on the 26th. We've set aside time today to talk about potential topics and such. I did get some input from Basalt on, I think, 2 topics that they're interested in having a discussion on. One is affordable housing. I think that's going to be an issue that probably crosses all 3 jurisdictions, and there's some activity on. Basalt was interested in talking about education, and Mike and I have traded phone messages to try and get some clarification. I'm not sure what
Like
the scope of that would be.
public school education or K through 12 or?
That's how I read it, so I'll get some clarification from him. But now time is set aside today for us to talk a little bit. Are there agenda items that this board thinks would be appropriate for the 3 bodies to be discussing together?
Patty?
Well, yeah, I'm sure that we're going to want to talk land use. I'm not sure the specifics. I'll let the other board members pitch in on that. But the one thing that I do want to bring up, very short discussion, is we're going to be organizing a class for electeds on incident command system, the ICS system, and we want to make sure that we bring in Eagle and Basalt elected officials to that. So that'll just be something brief that I wanted to discuss, just to give them a heads up.
George?
You know, I was at this town meeting a couple months ago when Eagle County Commissioners were there. They were going through an exercise in terms of looking at sort of long-term, long-range planning for the area. And they saw a lot of similarities. And so Jackie, the mayor, suggested, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to bring in Pickens County as well. And so I guess what I would suggest is to have more of a, perhaps a philosophical discussion in terms of what the Mid-Valley, which includes Eagle County and Basalt and Pickens County, should be looking like in the next 10, 15 years. What does build-out look like? What are some of the implications in terms of the buildings, the impact, whether it be education or health and human services or public safety? So sort of a broader discussion, since we have all the bodies there, to maybe help with some long-range planning that's going on through Eagle County and Basalt.
With the 3, and I guess is it okay if I ask, because I know the board hasn't necessarily weighed in on that, but if we go with something like that, do we need somebody who's going to mediate the discussion? Is that something you guys think you could just come together and do?
You know, the Basalt had sort of listed on a flip chart sort of their 10 long-range goals, and Eagle County had done something similar, and so there was definitely a crossover and a mesh. And we could just perhaps have them revisit that and be part of that discussion.
Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Basalt has a foot in both counties. I would say, listen, here, you mediate it or find a mediator. And I agree with George. I think looking at a long-term planning is better than, is the best thing we can do. But Basalt sort of has an interest in linking Eagle with Pitkin with Basalt. And so I think they should take the lead on that. In terms of whatever education is, it's the wrong board. It's just not what we do. So he'd have to weave that in a very skillful way to get me to agree to it, because it's just not our board.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Following up on Michael, I think it's worth finding out further what they meant by education. It may be related to the Aspen School District's quarter-cent sales tax in Aspen, which will be potential to expire soon, which the school district's interested in asking for renewal, as I understand it, and perhaps they're interested this time in seeing if they could go countywide. So they may have been talking to Basalt already about that concept and, the additional funds that would flow to their school district in that part of the town. So let's see what it relates to first, but it might be a taxing question for the county or something like that. So I'd like to find out what it is, but in general, I agree with Michael, it's interesting. The thing for me is I don't think we really can discuss Ace Lane directly because it's in their county land use process. We have made formal comments and we will continue to make formal comments, but it's not set up as a public hearing on that project, so it wouldn't really be something they would need to shut down pretty quickly. But the land use discussion is certainly a way to broach many of the topics that should be reviewed under or with a mind too, such as how much affordable housing versus how much new free market housing, and how much further it gets us into the deficit of housing in the area. And so I think a little bit of kind of what we're seeing as part of the recovery from the economics might make some sense to talk about how, hey, there were some real housing opportunities for a while, but I think we all seem to know that that's passed already. So I think that kind of talking about the changing nature of the valley in the AH conversation that they're having would like to have be valuable. And if we compare kind of similar goals and Basalt's goals and things like that as you're discussing, George, I think that's a great idea. But it may be something that we want to see if it's an invitation to set up more of a process going forward. How much do you accomplish in one meeting versus say, okay, let's think about some sort of longer-term process to try to, as Michael has said, weave together these different components of the valley into something that is copacetic and has good long-term results. So I can see doing that.
The other thing on housing, perhaps we can have a little discussion about senior housing needs. Eagle County is moving forward with a fairly unique, successful model in CCR, continuing care retirement facility that Eagle County, as the seniors have tried, and it's not going to be successful. So it'd be interesting to see Eagle County's approach, and perhaps what sort of support or participation Basalt would like to see perhaps moving forward down the road. Because we know that issue is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
I was in town last night and overheard a discussion and recognized one of the people who was involved, somebody I knew, and it's a gentleman and his wife who are originally from here coming back here, and I think that they are discussing the use of that property on the south side, not letting that issue die there and looking at some opportunities. I don't think it's in the thing, but just a heads up on it. So
They better act fast because the contract expires.
I know they're here right now working on it.
That's great.
Yeah, they've got like 2 months left or so now. Michael?
Yeah, on a philosophical basis, I think the question would be, what unites us and what divides us? So just to discover those things, I think jointly would be good. And the other question is, and this is affordable housing, but not really directly, is, does prosperity help affordable housing, or does it hurt affordable housing? So, what do we do here, and how are we prepared for prosperity, essentially, that's returning to the valley? I've just general philosophical questions are a good way to lead things off into, and then go into specifics at a later date. And I think that's right. We should have a continuing plan. So how do we continue this? Do we do it on a yearly basis, on a 6-month basis, on a 4-month basis? What do we do? So, and I think we should make a commitment at that meeting to something.
Would we have, if all the other parties agree to this, would we have ComDev staff there as well as their ComDev staff there, just to at least listen to part of that discussion since it's long-range planning?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an open meeting, and so it may be appropriate. What I would encourage for you guys is to bring staff in later, that this is kind of an initial discussion with all three bodies where you're both getting to know each other and understanding each other. And as much as I love staff, and I do, we can sometimes present too much.
Oh, no, I just meant to have them in the
Yeah.
audience just listening,
can hear
not to be participatory.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a priority, particularly if we're talking about a vision for the Mid-Valley. As we're all going through these kinds of planning processes, it'd be important for them to hear what the elected bodies are saying.
Well, let's not even restrict that vision to the Mid-Valley. Let's restrict it to the jurisdictions.
Fair enough.
And see how they work together. Maybe the meeting point is the Mid-Valley. It seems like it, but maybe it isn't. So
Fair enough.
I would think having just a brief discussion about our successes in joint efforts, and one would be the open space acquisitions, which have been participated in by all three entities, and actions on our water, the Colorado Water Plan, and efforts to keep healthy rivers and streams and reliable water supply has been pretty common element for all three entities also. Rachel?
Yeah, Steve, I had kind of thought of that, and then thought that we have talked about some of those things in past joint meetings, and so I'm not sure it's as timely. We may well do additional work in other meetings beyond this when we move a little further, I think, towards issues like the water park. But I know that Eagle County is pretty up on the water issues because of their participation in QQ, and then also familiarity with some of the other questions of the water plan and so on. So, I mean, we can put it out there as a potential topic, but it seems that depending on the length of the meeting, if we're going to get into meaty discussions about some of these other things, we may not have that much time for it. So that's just a kind of a modifier.
But we go down the list of what unites us. And those,
oh, absolutely.
Those are the things
Absolutely.
that are unite us.
Yeah.
But one of the things I might suggest along those lines is, because I agree, the vision discussion is big. That takes time. You also have an Eagle board with new members on it, as well as a manager, and we haven't necessarily had those same celebrations. So maybe it's, I think where you're going, it's a good way to frame up the discussion. If we're going to be talking about what kind of visions unite us, or maybe the opposite, it's a good way to frame it up to say, hey, we've successfully worked together on a lot of things. One of the things that, and we know those, we're not here to talk about those today, but let's celebrate them just for a moment before we move into this other discussion, which is going to have some commonalities and probably some differences, so that we can acknowledge those successes, so you can frame it up that
differences are
way.
three different governments. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
that's the big difference.
Yeah, well, you know, if we are striking up the commonality list, it's certainly the joint work on health and human services.
Absolutely.
And then the coordination with fire, rescue, cooperation throughout the valley, mutual aid.
You know, I think that was pointing those things out could be good for new members like Jeannie McQueen, being a new commissioner from Eagle. And she might not be aware of everything that we have going on together. Patty?
I just have a real quick question too. Speaking of joint commonalities, the Eagle County Building in El Jabal, I noticed there's a public or a land use sign up in front of it. Do you know anything about that? Nothing we want to discuss at the meeting, just cued me when we're talking about things
Yeah,
that we do jointly. Could we maybe find out what they're planning to do to that building? Because we still have
We
our
were able to formalize.
the 5,000
We
square
did
foot.
formalize
Yeah.
that.
I just want to make sure.
That's something that's a cooperative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
later.
yeah, in the history of the
That's
purchase of
only
the original land.
20,000 feet now.
So if you could just maybe find out what they're,
Yeah.
I just noticed it when I drove by the other day. Funny when you see those signs go up, your eyes kind of,
Okay, anything else? Any other ideas? I think an
Pretty full
important
agenda.
thing will be, this is the first of what we hope are many joint meetings between the three entities, and
Yeah.
we want to get it off on a good foot. Okay, future agendas?
Yeah, don't have a whole lot for you on future agendas. We're struggling right now. It looks like we are going to try and move the Healthy Rivers and Streams joint meeting. You guys had asked for a follow-up. Right now, it's looking like between availability for this board as well as that board, we may be moving that out to July. We had originally scheduled it for June 23rd, then we had moved it to June 9th, and we couldn't get enough participation from our other boards. So just to let you know, we're continuing to work on that. That follow-up, that quick follow-up discussion you asked for, could end up getting pushed out to June. We're also still going to be looking, pushed out to July. Similarly, we're trying to find some time for the Planning Commission on your future agendas. We haven't been successful in lining that one up yet either, so we're working on that. Otherwise, I don't have any changes except to note that on today's agenda, our citizen board interview did cancel, and so for those of you who hadn't heard that, we're going to be eliminating that as far as a 15-minute from now future agenda.
George?
I'd like to get on a future agenda sooner than later. A discussion regarding the greenhouse grow site down in Holland Hills. And we can get this on an agenda shortly. We can inform the residents who've been sending us emails and inquiring me in the store and get the owner here to see exactly what they are doing, what the problem is, because they have not seemed to be able to solve the issue of the odor. And it may be an opportunity for the BOCC to perhaps impose some different benchmarks, so we don't have to wait to when permit actually expires to try to make a decision. There's maybe opportunities to say, well, if you don't have this corrected by such and such a date, here are some ramifications. So we don't come to the end and we're sort of stuck, and maybe some board members who would not be comfortable in terms of denying the permit. So anyway, I think we should have this discussion and get this on the agenda soon.
Steve, I totally agree, but I also think as part of that, and I don't know who would be responsible since we don't really have a code enforcement person right now, but it's my understanding that there may be other grow operations in the Holland Hills area that may be contributing to this, and not just outside of this one grow site.
We'll find out.
Michael?
Well, I'd also like to schedule an executive session with John Ely for his advice on what the legal issues are here, so.
But I don't know who, is there somebody, sheriff's office, or, I don't know how we even go about that. But I think that if we're gonna be looking at that, this is something that's come up, and I don't know if it's true or not, but if it's out there, I think we need to look at it one way or the other. And if there's other potential contributors to this odor when you drive through Holland Hills, it would be nice to know that.
Agreed. Yeah, there's always the potential of caregivers. We're
Right.
not under the same permitting. And I can't recall if the state really did anything to actually limit the number of plants they can have and patients they can have this year, but
So there are a lot of loopholes.
there's a lot of loopholes in that portion. So it'd be good to find that out. That's good.
Well, yeah, well, I know, and just having been in Denver, it was amazing how many neighborhoods we went by where we could smell what appeared to be or seemed to be odors from marijuana in the Denver neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Rachel?
The other thing I think we need to get onto our future agendas is a site visit for the equestrian facility on the glacier proximity and that open space. And we're starting to get more letters about
The parking or
the parking for the horse trailers, that right now there's no place. I mean, there was one of the most recent letters, I can't verify its veracity, but said that the only place large enough to park a horse trailer is down at the Jaffe Park, but that has been closed to them because they do so much boat loading and unloading for the river at this time of year.
Oh, you're talking at, you're talking the glacier, because the Wing
Well,
Jaffe.
we've gotten two different letters.
Oh, okay.
And both were about going to do the site visit on Glacier to get the parking settled. And one referenced the fact that they'd been told by one of our staffers that there's really no legal parking places for horse trailers now other than Jaffe Park, you know.
Oh, okay.
And so again, I don't know the veracity of it, but I think that at the very least, we committed during the hearing that we would have a site visit, and we haven't had it scheduled yet.
And actually, open space is working. That was one item I was supposed to bring to you that I,
Okay. Michael?
Well, I was at the Open Space and Trails meeting. They had numerous people there representing the horse council, or at least representing horse interests or horse trailer interests. And I think there was some fundamental misunderstanding on their part. I mean, they just didn't feel like they were represented at the year-long planning process. And the Carrot property is going to have horse trailer parking. You know, the size of horse trailer parking, depends on your numbers, but it's hard to get that much parking available for horse parking, since you've got 40 feet in length of vehicle, essentially, or combined vehicles. So it's tough. Their feeling was that the site visit was a way of implementing their parking plan. It's just a site visit, which is, we see the layout of the land, we see the Carrot property, we see various properties there. It shouldn't lead them to unrealistic expectations of parking just because we're going on the site visit. That was, I mean, those were some of the problems that I observed at the last Open Space and Trails meeting.
and I apologize. I had that in my notes to bring up to you, and I skipped right over it. So Open Space and Trails was looking for availability of board members for May 29th. Rachel, I think you
Yeah,
are
I'll be
out.
back.
Oh, you'll be
What day
back,
is that?
okay. That is a Friday?
I'm going to be working the city election that day.
Okay.
I'm available all day.
I'm out of town.
That's right. You're going to be working a city election. Can we go with a partial board, or do we need to? I'm a little concerned about trying to find a date with all of you, but we can try.
We may have to do two, you know, and just do
Or, yeah, or
the
I
members you
can,
can, and
also
then,
from open space, maybe just a board member, I mean, a
Yeah.
staff person one day when they're down that way. I can find a way to see the property.
yeah, depending on what time they pick, I could just meet down there, you know, or go with someone on the 29th. That's fun. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Tomorrow we have a fairly short agenda. I just, based on Michael's comments, would it be appropriate to try to do a short exec session with John on the
I want to
agreements?
come back to the marijuana because we went like 4 different directions there, so I just want to come back to that one too. So May 29th, we'll schedule a site visit, and then if there's some one-offs.
The first site.
Yeah. Steve, can I?
Oh, yeah.
I have a few specifics to future agendas, and Dorothea Ferris happens to be here today. I wanted to make sure we invited you to the regular meeting agenda on Wednesday, May 27th for our proclamation for Kevin Wright.
Oh, is that one?
Mm-hmm. I thought it would be appropriate for
May
Dorothea.
27th?
Yes,
Thank you.
at the beginning of our meeting. The other question I had was on June 24th. Michael, you'll still be gone, right? Because you're not coming back till 4th of July? We have, and Rachel, are you, was somebody else going to be out of town?
I'm going to be gone also on the
24th?
24th, which it didn't show up on the future agenda, John.
Yeah, we're getting those updated.
Okay, just because we have a gardener's taking determination that's been continued and continued and continued, and I wanted to make sure that they were aware that we wouldn't have a full board that day.
Okay, and so Steve.
Yeah, and that tomorrow, maybe we could put that off until July, at tomorrow's meeting.
Well, it's generally up to the applicant's choice.
Yeah,
Once
we
we
can-
tell them
right.
that it's not going to be a full board.
Yeah.
And then they can
And
make that
chances are it might be
decision.
just continued and continued, so maybe they're still working on it anyway.
Mhm.
And I think that was, no, one of the ones that I had to bring to your attention.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask about the meeting on, it's not on the agenda, it's with Senator Gardner is planning a meeting in Grand Junction. That's this Saturday. Steve, are you, is somebody going?
George and Chris Selden are the two who were able to go.
I may or may not be going, I'll let you know. My kids are putting on a roof that day, so I may have to be
I
cooking.
think, yeah, let Charlotte know. That seemed to be they were wanting to get
Yeah.
a head count of some kind.
Yeah, I'll let her know.
Can I come back to the marijuana? I just want to kind of do a check-in and make sure I'm meeting everyone's expectations, because we kind of jumped around. It is a short meeting tomorrow, and the board has the ability to call an executive session if you so wish to get advice from attorney. I think John is prepared to give you an overview of what you're able to do. Remember, this is under licensing, not under
Land use.
enforcement, so it's not a code enforcement issue, and that's going to be, I think, an important distinction with all of these that we're talking about, because you have both licensed and unlicensed legal kinds of facilities that we have different
Right,
kind
right.
of capabilities on. So certainly talking about what we're able to do vis-a-vis an existing approved license, I think we could probably do that tomorrow if
That's
the
fine.
board
I like-
is up for that. And that would take care, I believe, of the executive session kind of request advice from attorney. Then my suggestion to follow up on what George was talking about is to do a work session. Again, to talk about the licensing, the particular license that we're talking about, the particular issues, have an opportunity for the neighbors to give voice, and for you guys to do some deliberation and give staff direction whether you want us to schedule time on a future agenda, say a regular meeting or what have you, to take formal action of one kind or another, because there's a broad continuum of actions I think you're able to take under our licensing rules. So I think it'd be appropriate to do a work session first, collect the information from both the current license or permit holder as well as the concerned neighbors, kind of publicly give voice to what you are and are not able to do in these situations. And then you can give direction from there for a follow-up kind of regular meeting or formal meeting, or another work session if you need it to follow up on additional items. And that would allow you guys to step through the process at whatever pace you want to then, if you're ready to make a decision quickly or if you need more information.
Michael?
My only concern would be unrealistic expectations, actually, just
Yeah.
like the horse council. You know, they want that parking lot, they want it now, god damn it. And And I just don't want the neighborhood to think that this is a meeting to consider the license in effect or not in effect. So I don't know how we get around that, but.
I have to put some thought into that, because, you know, as soon as it goes on the agenda, that's going to be the nature of the discussion, is what happens with the, you know, license, or is there any action?
Well, we're gonna have neighbors here and saying, stop the operation, shut it down, I don't care what it takes. I don't wanna have a meeting like that.
And you've got more options than that. You'll have more options than that to consider, but because we haven't been through this process before, I think we need to schedule it so that you have time to understand those options and the public has time. That's why I was suggesting the work session as a way for staff to lay out what those options and alternatives are and have that discussion, because it's not just yes or no. I think there's, you've got a continuum of options that you could go through vis-a-vis that permit. But it's not going to be, I don't know how to make that an easy discussion, because it's not a code enforcement issue and it's the board's call at the end of the day.
I have a question for George. That one letter that we got was about air quality issues. Do we have any more information as to, I don't think we have a pre-greenhouse air quality study to determine, and I don't even know if there's a way to quantify, qualify, identify that issue, but I don't know how we resolve that with the person.
I just don't
know.
think we want to go start having the discussion now.
No,
I
I'm
mean,
just
you're
asking,
raising a great point.
I'm asking George, do we need any more information at this meeting? Do we need somebody, I mean,
I didn't read that letter, but I'm assuming that they're.
oh, I thought it went to you.
From Brown.
I think they're equating air quality with odor.
Right, okay.
The issue is not, there is not a technical standard that's going to be a code enforcement issue. Again, this is going to be, what do you want to have enforced through
Okay.
your licensing process?
I just didn't know if we needed any more follow-up on that letter that we
Yeah.
specifically.
So we
can
can
discuss that with
Yeah,
you.
we can talk about that during the work session, but there really are no standards against which we'd measure that.
Okay.
And I guess when you schedule that, John, you probably need a good hour, because you probably want to take some public comments. You'll have the operator here, hopefully, to try to address
Yeah.
some questions and any issues and things like that.
We almost need an hour for the future agenda request. That's that's all I've got for you on future agendas.
Okay. Next, we have the carbon fee and dividend discussion. We have all the landfill people are here, John, and I know that I was pretty sure Mona was going to try to be here for the carbon fee and dividend discussion.
Yeah, if we have the interested parties here, I'd suggest it's kind of the board's pleasure how you want to spend your work session time. So we could change the order.
And they might, I mean, Mona or whoever might come in and have to sit through the landfill discussion, but we could proceed right into the landfill thing right now and then come back to the carbon fee and dividend. What's,
It's scheduled for 2 o'clock. I mean, Mona, she's
Yeah.
coming in from the airport, and she's taking time away from her work.
yeah,
So I don't think that we could try to see if she's coming in. I don't know if Cindy was going to be here as well, but I wouldn't put her off just because we're ahead of schedule here and the next agenda.
so what
folks
we
are here.
could do, we could just go to open discussion until 3 o'clock and,
Until 2 o'clock.
I mean, 2 o'clock, yeah. I hope open discussion doesn't go till 3
As long as future agendas.
Okay, let's move to open discussion then.
Well, this is potentially going to be short too. So we are going to be having Dave Detweiler come in for the facilities update around 3:15, and so I'll want to come back to that. Just 2 things. One of them is listed. We did get a thank you letter from Youth Zone for the grant that they received from the Healthy Community Fund. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. The other item I just wanted to bring up is we did complete our exercise with the Type 3 Northwest
Region.
Region Incident Management Team. I'm not quite sure even how to do that acronym. I can't remember it. But it was a good exercise. I know a couple of you had an opportunity to attend the debrief. They did a just over 2-day exercise on a major mudslide that cut off utilities, knocked built houses off of foundations. There were multiple deaths in the exercise. It was an exercise, I would note, where we had an escalation of an incident that exceeded our local capacities to deal with, and we were exercising with the incident management team that we would be calling in on how to conduct that transfer, how we would transfer authority for management of the incident from our staff to their staff, setting boundaries, and that sort of thing. And I haven't gotten the final debrief on the exercise. The debriefs that I have received, the exercise went very well, very complimentary of our preparedness, although we always know we can do better, and we're identifying those opportunities now. But we did have that opportunity to really exercise those agreements, drafting those agreements, transferring authority with the actual folks that we'd be working with if we had an incident of that nature here in Pickens County. So overall, I think the exercise went well. I know a couple of you had an opportunity to stop by and be part of that, and I don't know if you had any observations from your time there you wanted to share.
First, I want to thank Valerie. She got great kudos during the event when we were there. She did an amazing job. These are not easy things to pull off when you have a room full of all those different people. The great face-to-face relationships that were made, I think, is a huge part of when they respond. You already have created that relationship. And they did, as part of the ICS training for executives, did recommend that executives, elected officials, go through that every 2 years. So on the top of the fact we have so many new electeds in the Valley, but I think those exercises are very beneficial, and Valerie put in a lot of effort and a lot of hard work and needs to be thanked and commended for that.
Great.
It was great.
Very good.
Yeah. It was neat seeing counterparts from our county staff from other counties and municipalities there working on the thing, because it was a chance for them to kind of interact with their cohorts from other agencies, and in an actual emergency that would be invaluable, kind of a personal relationship to have, either in the emergency might be in their county, in Eagle County or something, where our staff would be going to help them. So
What it was also interesting is that another division, not that all the divisions weren't working hard, it was pretty neat to see everybody in action, but was the public information officers were given big kudos. And I went in and actually talked to the girl from Eagle County. No, she wasn't from Eagle, she was from further away. Dillon, she was actually from Dillon. And the girl from the Aspen. And they were great, and they said how beneficial it was for them, because, feeling it out and knowing who to represent and who not to.
kind of related to that, John, I was wondering if we should talk about our shortage of workers in the 911 communications center here, which the more I think about it, it's a little bit alarming to me that we could have some staff burnout, and what's the situation, and are we taking any steps to try to recruit more people, going extraordinary steps or anything?
Yeah, so Steve, we have implemented some temporary measures. First, turnover in 911 communication centers is a nationwide problem. It's a far more difficult job, I think, than most people realize. It is a 24/7 operation. and it's you know, typically a fairly high-pressure environment when you're actually dealing with an emergency, and it can be a very complicated operating environment. And so it's not an easy job, and turnover and retention is an issue really nationwide for 911 because of that. I think on top of that, for our community, there are additional pressures, you know, whether it be cost of living or the travel that may be associated with getting to and from work, you know, and quite frankly, we're coming into a more competitive labor market again. And so we are in a period where we've had some significant turnover at the dispatch center. In response to that, we have implemented temporary, pretty significant temporary pay changes. We have upped the hourly rates by $3 an hour for all the dispatchers. That is within our budget to do, particularly because we've had the turnover that we've had, and an effort to help stem the
Overtime losses.
Yeah, and we also have been changing the schedule. The schedule right now is pretty stressful on the folks until we bring people on. That $3 an hour bump is also extending to our recruitment of new dispatchers. In the meantime, Bruce has been working on schedule and you know, other aspects. But right now it is we are spread thin there. We are aggressively recruiting and interviewing candidates. I don't have an update for you right now on where we stand exactly in that process, but could certainly get that from HR. But it has been high on our list to really both stem the turnover and bring new folks on. It does take 4 to 6 months to train up a dispatch worker. The other thing that we're going to look at bringing in front of you, which is has not been a common practice for our county, but is not uncommon when you have these high turnover positions that have high training requirements, is to have what you call fill-ahead positions, which are in essence unbudgeted authorized FTEs, so you can overhire when you're anticipating some turnover and get folks into the training wheel, and you know, as you experience turnover, you've got somebody ready to come in more quickly. And so that is an option that I've asked staff to look at bringing forward to you, and to model out how many would be appropriate to stay within budget but also stay ahead of the curve. So we are responding to it, and like I said, it's a challenge in every dispatch center throughout the country, and we just hit a good run of turnover right now.
Okay. All right. Any other open discussion items, or we could come back to that
Yeah.
later too?
I have one for later.
Okay, we'll come back to that later.
And Mona did sneak in.
Yep. So, next on our agenda is a follow-up discussion on the carbon fee and dividend proposal. And Mona, why don't you come up to the front table, and we can kind of lead the
Maybe
discussion.
I'll kick it off.
So, John, yeah.
Because Mona was not asked to come here to present anything. I just let Mona know that we're going to be talking about that, as well as
Yeah.
Ruthie, who's joining us now. But really, what this is the board had asked for follow-up time to discuss the fee and dividend proposal that was presented by local representatives of the Citizens Climate Lobby. At that time, the board said you did not want another presentation, but maybe some additional information. That was provided to you in the packet. We provided a macroeconomic study from REMI, R-E-M-I. I cannot remember what that acronym stands for at the moment. as well as, I believe, some FAQs, which was from the National Citizens Climate Lobby website. Also reached out to Mona, who I believe reached out to everyone else who had an interest, just to let them know that the board would be talking, following up on the discussion on the Citizens Climate Lobby, in case they wanted to have representatives here to answer questions. So don't worry that you got put up front. I think it's to answer questions more so than a expectation
We're
of
not going to put you on the spot,
of
but
a-
to
of a
answer questions, I
presentation.
think would be valuable.
Steve had also requested that I bring a summary document. I gave you the full study from
I
Remy.
noticed that.
Of course, there's a 4-page version I could have given you, but I wanted you to have all the information. So there's a summary if.
And REMI stands for Regional Economic Modeling, Inc. So it's a private company that does economic studies for anybody who hires them. They've done, a wide variety of things about lots of different things. So they're a totally independent think tank kind of a place that does these studies.
So last time when representatives from the local Citizens Climate Lobby were in front of you, you had 2 requests. One request was to support via a resolution the fee and carbon fee and dividend proposal that the Citizens Climate Lobby is putting forward for adoption at the national level. And the second request was that a representative of the board attend the national conference, which is coming up soon.
6 weeks.
In 6 weeks. The board's responded to that second request. Steve is going to be attending that conference, but you want to have more time, I think, to talk about whether you should support the initiative through a formal resolution. And that is the extent of my presentation. This was really about giving you guys time to talk about it.
So it's unfortunate, I think, that you didn't have the summary in hand before the meeting to look over, because to me, I started reading the full report and I understand the REMI report, and it was confusing to me. If you were an economist or involved in the statistical end of things or something, it probably makes a lot more sense. The full report. The summary report I can understand more easily. Patty?
Yeah, I would like the opportunity to read the summary. I did read through most of and found myself pretty much confused. A lot of language that didn't flow right for me in both the legislative proposal and just some of the information. It is not in any way, shape, or form that I don't support this. I just need a better understanding. I think the resolution the draft is good. It needs just a little bit of tweaking to make me more comfortable. Some wordsmithing, as Dorothea is familiar with, some grammar, some punctuation, some...
Oh, come on, bright idea.
Somebody had to do the Dorothea thing on this. But I think I have a concern, and it's much like we say about our REMP program. This carbon fee and dividend, to me, the long-term goal would be to have no carbon emissions, to really put a rein in on greenhouse gas, at least within our own control in this country. Therefore, would we be still receiving any funds to do this payback to the consumers, to the households? And then if that was true, and we actually were lessening the amount of money because we were having less emissions, source point emissions, then what happens then to all these great statistics on job generation and economic quote-unquote development money being put back into the system by people spending their credits that they get back, their check that they get in the mail? I have questions on how it's going to be set up. More of a pragmatist. Who's going to collect the money? How is this money going to get back to the households? How is that all going to be set up when it says that 100% of the money collected goes back? Well, who's going to fund the group that gives the money back? So I have a lot of those questions. Again, not to say that I don't think we shouldn't move forward with some kind of a resolution passed by this board. hopefully to be in your hot little hands when you guys go to Washington.
George?
Yeah, I don't think that we need to sort of get down into the weeds on this in terms of the details. I think what they're asking for is just a resolution supporting the idea and the concept. You know, there was an attempt to try to do this a couple of years ago, actually through our former Senator Mark Udall, in terms of a cap and trade, which had some support, but it really wasn't going anywhere because it has some other issues. And I think this proposal tries to address some of those issues in terms of being able to actually create jobs, grow the economy, and things like that. So for me, and I don't see that this is going to have any impact on our rep at all. This is
No, I'm not saying on our rep. I'm saying,
this is sort of like rep on steroids.
well, that's
right?
what I was saying. I don't think it's going to impact, that's not what I was
So
saying at
for
all.
me,
George.
I think we could just move ahead with support for the idea, the concept, the modeling, give it a resolution. Steve can then take it to DC, representing Picken County, and that just adds to all the other communities throughout the country that will be there.
Steve, can I? That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying is, but in the long run, with this thing moves forward, I think that I have a lot more questions and need a better understanding. Again, I think that we need to move forward with the resolution. It needs a little tweaking for me to be comfortable, but, and I think it should go back with Steve. As far as the ramp, I'm just was imaging that same kind of long-term goal is to actually reduce these emissions, therefore reducing the amount of money that comes into the pot. But, you know, I don't want to be into the micromanaging. I just felt that that was part of an understanding that I needed.
Rachel?
Yeah, you know, I think Patty raises a good point. What happens as the program tails off? You know, what happens as you've become successful, and will people be dependent on those fees? And I would be a wild guess, but, you know, it seems that a big part of this is that the companies producing the energy or the products will be choosing less expensive or non-carbon ways to do that, so that they are more competitive and they don't have to charge as much. And so you could kind of see the two dropping together, both the payment and the cost. But it's something that, again, would be worthwhile to show visually how people see this would have that effect over time. I have read through the resolution. I'm comfortable with it as is. You know, it's a little funny layout because I think the words are stretched.
Well, there's commas that are missing and things like that.
I didn't pick up on those in the same way, but I would be comfortable passing the resolution of support and bringing it forward. I think that I do appreciate the further report and the more detailed information. As I said at the first meeting, I think it'd be great for you guys to produce some visuals that really had, you know, the family and the kid and where the money comes from and why it's coming and you know, how the transactions multiply over time or what it has the effect of. You know, you do raise the questions that are in the weeds about how much would it cost to administer the rebate, you know, and how much, you know, is the cost of that. We kind of know that can be a pretty big number just from, you know, Picken County's collection of, say, the use tax and the amount of people who have to go into, you know, determining how much the use tax should be and everything like that. So there are a lot of detail levels, but I'm okay moving it forward. And at the end of the day, I suppose it's because there is no other, you know, program or pilot project or suggestion of how in a economic model to move. You know, there's a lot of environmental arguments, there's a lot of you know, human quality of life and climate change issues. This is an economic model, and so that's why I think it's very different and has the potential of having effect. And it kind of takes that whole question out of, especially well noted in the report, that regardless of what you think is causing climate change or not, this is not about that. It's about just the extraction industries and the burning of fossil fuels. So I can support it and move it forward.
Michael?
Yeah, I don't understand it, actually. I mean, if this is an executive summary, it just takes more brain power than I have. I just don't understand it. So let me tell you what I think I understand, which is there is a tax at the production point of carbon fuels.
A fee, yeah.
A fee, but I can call it a tax. I mean, I think the industries are going to say it's a tax. and so it makes carbon products more expensive, which I think is, the hope is that given more expense, there'll be more conservation of that product. The fee or tax then is rebated to the citizenry in the United States somehow. So in effect, I mean, I don't see how it works then. I just don't see how it works. What's the upshot of that? More expensive, but you get so I don't see that it works at all. And of course, when I hear ramp on steroids, I get nervous, mostly because of my problem with ramp. I don't think it's a successful program, but then steroids is, is not something I want to see either. So, and I haven't had a clear explanation of it. I mean, this is full of graphs and
Yeah.
great. I mean, so I'm supposed to tell my constituency I'm going to support the raising of the price of gasoline?
Well, I think the intent is that moving away from automobiles, but if you had two different household products that you needed to buy, it's around a $500 investment for your new dishwasher or whatever, and one company has decided the best way for them to deal with their energy for production is buying wind power and solar or other alternatives, and so they can produce that dishwasher for $480, and they don't have to pay any carbon fee. And the company that didn't change their energy source is now using more energy than before, and so they're going to be charging you $520 for that washing machine, and you as the consumer would then make the choice to buy the less expensive washing machine. And the company that lost the sale would start thinking, boy, how can I start modernizing my efficiency and reduce each carbon input into that washing machine so I can be more price competitive. And perhaps at the same level, if it were on gasoline, it's about driving consumer choice over time to buy more fuel efficient cars that get 34 miles per gallon instead of 24 miles per gallon. So it is a price point type of incentive / disincentive, but the intention with the rebate is that you as the consumer will be refunded this cost that is going up and is chasing the market up, but at the same time parts of it are chasing the market down. But that seems to be the intent, is the right series of incentives and disincentives.
I don't see how that works. I mean, it's a great, on a sort of a large scale, I can kind of see what you're saying, but on the, it just doesn't work. The ramp doesn't work. It's like, allowing people to overeat and having other people who will diet for them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. You actually need to start at the source, and the sources are things like making wise consumption choices, saving on fuel, that kind of thing. But one of the reasons that, in general, people are so happy now is that they don't have to pay that much money for gas. So if I were to say, I'm going to raise the price of gasoline, and that should make you happier, that's an impossible position for me to take.
Well, I think that the study showed that the price per gallon of gasoline would be 0.0009 cents for the amount of carbon it would emit per gallon. So I think it's a fairly, I mean, you're right, Michael, in many ways. That I could shoot holes through this. But on the other hand, do we as commissioners turn back to our constituents and say, climate change, maybe one day we'll find a mechanism. Maybe one day we'll find.
Let's not get into the argument about climate change.
But
I'm talking about the specifics of this program.
Okay.
And it's an economic-driven program by the imposition of a fee or tax on fossil fuels.
And a rebate.
And a rebate.
Well, again, I'm just asking, what would be the alternative to change the national economy and to change our dependence on fossil fuels? How would we have the type of shift necessary as a country to
Well, I think
avert
you've
warming.
seen it already. I mean, you know, you have the Energy Star program, which means that your refrigerators and your washing machines and your dryers are far more efficient than those same appliances 20 years ago. You have the CAFE standards for vehicles. So people are getting far better mileage now than they used to. So those have made things more expensive to some degree, but they've changed the entire industry, the entire transportation industry. They've changed entire appliance industries. And those impositions that are, and essentially the CAFE was done because our dependence on foreign oil was so great. We decided, well, if we're going to be a country that depends on this kind of personal transportation, we need to have better standards because we don't want to be that dependent on foreign fuel. It wasn't so much an argument about global warming. The effect, though, has been for the lessening of those impacts. So there are other ways to do it, and there's other successful ways to do it. And I think, I just don't think that, I mean, I just couldn't get into promoting this simply because I just can't be seen as someone who would raise your taxes, but I promise to give them back to you at a later date. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. And it'll be easy to do for 330 million consumers. I just don't see it.
George?
I don't think we're going to resolve this issue. Michael doesn't agree with the rent, so there's no sense arguing about that. He has his point of view, but I was going to suggest that perhaps Mona or Ruthie could perhaps try to answer Michael's question, since you are a proponent of this.
I'll just start and then I'll turn it over to Mona. So one concept that I think we as a nation really need to get our head wrapped around is that the word tax, this is not a tax per se. What this is paying the true environmental cost for a product. And if you put it in terms of that, then you have the realistic amount, just like any other business across the board. They have to pay what it cost to create that product. So we are asking that the fossil fuel industries pay the environmental cost for that product. And that does increase the overall fee for the product, which then gets picked up by the consumer. But in that, then it'll be more competitive with renewables, at which point then, as Rachel pointed out, so just changing that whole conversation, taking the word tax out of it, a part of segment will always try and spin it into a tax. Those who want to oppose it will spin it into a tax because for them, they don't want to pay the true environmental cost. This is just doing what is right.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point, Ruthie, but the political realities are that people can say it's a tax, and they're going to say you raise the price of fossil fuels. That is a problem for me. That's not a problem for many of the residents of Pickens County who can afford virtually anything, but for people who are struggling and people who need to get to work and people whose gas bill is at the limits of their possibilities of paying, I can't look them straight in the face and say, listen, you're paying for environmental costs here, so you shouldn't complain. You know, it's not a good program from my point of view. And I don't argue against the offset of, you know, there's environmental cost to fossil fuels. I'm not arguing against that. I just think your approach is the wrong approach, and it's not going to be a broad-based appeal to most people. I mean, you're selling it that way, but it's not going to be, because most people are struggling within the bounds of their income to deal with everyday life. And if you tell, as a politician, not as a promoter of this, but as a politician, you say, within the bounds of your struggle, of your daily life, I'm going to raise the costs of that daily life to you, and hopefully we'll offset it later, maybe in a year, maybe in 6 months, who knows, and you'll get it until somebody figures out how to spend it better, which is a problem in Washington. The last thing you want to do is funnel money to Washington because their inability to deal with money in a responsible way is, I mean, we all know it, so.
Patty?
Yeah, real quick, Rachel. I understand Michael's concerns, but I think we need to start somewhere, and I think this is a good way. Mark Udall, Senator Udall, would have been great if that had flown through, but we need to come at it maybe at a different angle. And with the board's okay, I'd like to work with John or staff and just do the grammar tweaks to this, make it flow a little better for my, and then I think we need to move it forward.
Yeah, as Georgia said, this is not about changing your mind, Michael, but...
No, but we were going to have a discussion.
Yeah,
I don't expect people, I just need to understand how it works, that's all.
Yeah, and I understand that, and we're not going to change your mind, and I can understand the logic of many things you're saying, but I think that all of that leads to the inertia of why nothing's been done at all. And you have to find some mechanism to start, whether it just springboard the dialogue to a better concept or whether it actually is implemented and begins the effort. But there has to be a mechanism to break the inertia. And the thing that really strikes me is that it's a parallel with water use and the state of Colorado's entire discussion about water use right now. And one of the key drivers about whether you're going to use 100 gallons a day on your lawn or not is the price of the water they charge you. And so as we're trying to say, there really shouldn't be a new trans-mountain diversion from the west slope of Colorado to funnel and feed lawns, which the market demands, those lawns. But the thing that people will respond to and do more xeriscaping is if their water use is charged the true cost of water. And that if you use X many gallons in a month, you pay one rate. If you're in the next tier, you pay a higher rate. And the next tier, you pay a higher rate. And that has been one of the greatest mechanisms that all water providers in Colorado have been able to use to reduce water consumption. And is greatly encouraged to communities that don't do a tiered rate system right now. But we're applying that exact same principle. And to the consumer, although their water bill may be higher this year for the same 100 gallons they used to use per day on their lawn, it's actually far less expensive than if that water provider needs to invest a couple $2 billion in new infrastructure for new transmission of water to the Front Range, new diversions. So, this is a technique that's used in almost everything. And when we talk about the horrible decay of the Colorado road system, it's because the legislature has been unwilling to raise the gasoline tax at all since 1991. And so consumers are paying far more on new alignments and tires and broken windshields than perhaps they would have in gasoline tax to repair our roads. But it has that term of tax. And so the essence of capitalism's success has always been to externalize your costs and make somebody else pick them up. I'm not going to pay more for gas, but I want somebody somehow to pay to fix the roads. And I'm not going to worry about the carbon emissions. I want somebody somewhere else to pay to relocate the water facilities in Florida and these coastal communities that are going underwater and deal with all the other issues. So to me, this is about taking an externalized cost and putting it back in the equation. And that may be a shock to some consumers, but it is the true cost of doing business and not being subsidized. So I'm happy to move this forward.
I would agree with moving it forward also. The Remy report really deals with direct economic benefits. And so they determine how many jobs will be created. 2.8 million jobs will be added to the American economy as a result of doing this. There will be improved air quality, would result in 230,000 premature deaths avoided over a 20-year period, and these kind of direct benefits. If this isn't adding in the avoided costs of doing nothing, because if our country does nothing, we're going to be paying, there's going to be trillions of dollars of loss of real estate, of buildings in Florida going underwater, of damage from big storm events, which we're already seeing that in Colorado, caused by too much CO2 in the air, basically, is driving all of these things. So if you add in those, and those are the external costs that Rachel was referring to, and if we need to do something to turn the clock back and start reducing our CO2 emissions, and this is a good place to start. I don't think this is the whole answer, but it's the start of the whole answer to me.
And if I could just make a point, I mean, drafting the legislation, they've been, CCLs, and we've been working on both sides of the aisle, if you will. And so to have the real mechanics and the details of this, it's difficult to present you with that, piece of legislation until it's finalized and ready to move forward. It's difficult to really talk about some of that. But I think both Rachel and Steve have really addressed some of the issues with this. This has been supported, the concept is really supported as on both sides of the aisle because it is an economic point of view. And after we presented, I just want to add, after we presented, I presented to the Rotary Club for Aspen and Snowmass. And actually there was an economist in there, and he stood up and he said, this is like I can't remember the tax, but he said, this is you tax the goods and you provide benefits. You tax the bads and you provide benefits to the goods, and that's exactly what this does. And so, this is something that economists can get behind and can really support going forward. So, thank you.
Also, one thing I really like about this, it has similarities to RMI's whole effort to attack the climate change issue, basing it all on economic things, to just show that economically it makes sense to do the right things, which would reduce our carbon emissions. And this is really a laissez-faire approach. It puts money in people's pockets, and then they can figure out how they can spend the money to reduce their consumption of carbon goods in the best way. It's not telling them how to do it, though. And I think that appeals to a wide range of people in the United States.
Just real quick, because I know we need to move on, but Ruthie, you're right. Is it a fee or a tax? And the spin on the other side is going to be it's a tax. It's even in this, our REMI report as a tax. So they may want to look at addressing that word, because it's in the policy, just the facts policy design, it's all under a tax rate. The tax would be, the tax would be, the tax would be. So if we're trying to get away from the use of the word tax, it's in their report, which is not working in your favor. To try and not use that word.
And I think the REMI report is done by a company, REMI, and
Right.
Citizens Climate Lobby is not going to go back and rewrite the REMI report.
No, but I'm just saying that you're trying to get away from that word, and the whole report
No.
that you've commissioned is using that word, so it's kind of hard to tell people it's really not a tax, which it's a fee.
Okay, so I think three of us are in favor. George, would you be in favor of moving ahead?
I said that
He
earlier.
was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, so,
So it's okay, I'll work with just to
and we,
tweak the language.
I mean, we still have opportunity for further discussion because the resolution would,
Come at a formal meeting.
They come at a regular meeting.
yeah.
So I'll take the direction and happily take grammar assistance from Patty, and we'll get the resolution put in front of you guys.
Thanks, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming back in.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break right now, and before we start
Good
our next
idea.
discussion.
And it's somebody's birthday coming up, Steve.
Oh, Steve's got a birthday.
I noticed the cake. Okay, welcome back to the Board of County Commissioners work session. The next item is a continuing discussion on the landfill operations RFP. And we asked a lot of questions last time, and this is a response to those. So we have Kathy and Brian here.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a short presentation by a team assembled here, and I guess we'll start with introductions. I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director for the county.
I'm Jonah Frank, the Big County Fleet Manager.
Kathy Hall, the Solid Waste Manager.
And we had a guest, and if you can introduce yourself, because the board asked for possibly another jurisdiction's approach to landfilling operations. So we called our neighbors in Summit County, and they're here today.
Hello, Board. My name's Aaron Byrne. I'm the Solid Waste Director over in Summit County.
Thanks for coming
Thank you
over.
for coming over.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Get him some cake, too.
Yeah. This is a continuation of our discussion from last Tuesday. And before we get started, I really have a couple of things I'd like to say. But after that, Jonah Frank, our fleet manager, will answer the questions that were raised about our equipment purchase and hourly cost. Kathy's going to get into labor and certifications we have at the landfill. And then Aaron's going to talk about the Summit County story and how they've approached their landfilling operations. But first off, with regard to Pitkin County, this is a privatization question. And we've dealt with these before, whether it was janitorial services or fleet maintenance, and we've approached them differently based on cost analysis and the quality of service to our customer. With regard to the landfill, about 2 years ago, we started looking at privatization of our recycling program. The Board of County Commissioners made a decision, and I think rightly so, was to privatize recycling in Pitkin County and to go to single stream recycling, which has proved successful. It's increased our recyclables, and it has saved the county money by diverting that to the private sector. It's allowed the 9 people at the landfill to refocus their attention. This is a reassignment of our capacity. And so we looked at taking over the composting at the landfill. We're doing that now. We've increased our quality of service at the gate. We'll be taking over the aggregate program. In addition, we've increased the quality and safety of our HHW, Household Hazardous Waste Program, and our electronics recycling program. So we're continuing to raise the quality of services at the landfill by that one privatization decision. And that's allowed this issue to be brought to the board today so that we could continue to refocus our attention. We will answer all the questions that were raised. We still feel confident in our staff recommendation to reject all of the contractors' bids that were submitted and for the county to submit a supplemental budget request to purchase the equipment and hire the people necessary to do the landfilling operations. Something that was said at the last meeting, which is not true, we talked about the time-sensitive nature of this issue, and someone said we've got plenty of time. It may look like on the surface we have plenty of time, but in order to staff up and buy the equipment, we have a critical path that we need to follow in order to be ready by February of 2016, and we're hitting that right now. We just don't want to delay this decision too much longer, regardless of the outcome, whether the decision from the Board of County Commissioners is for the county to take over or a contractor to take it over, because either way, there's staffing and equipment that needs to be brought in to the fold. So with that, Jonah Frank will be glad to answer all the questions that were brought up in the last meeting.
On the fleet purchases, we did research these numbers heavily with all of our vendors, and we researched the cost of operations as well. Our numbers in the hourly rate is the fuel and parts and maintenance supplies. The fleet allocation number towards the bottom is the labor projections number. That is the time fleet will be spending out there. Close to 500 hours is expected just for these items on this list. There were some questions raised about the grinder and the life cycles in this, and the vendors, when we went out to do this, for the tonnage that comes into the landfill and that is processed and through proper maintenance, they believe an 8 to 10 year life can be achieved. We also have some additional funds that were in our purchase price that are in the unknown category or major rebuilds if there was to be any. So we had some of those additional funds in our purchase price.
How much was that, Jonah?
It was right around 100,000 for the grinder, and then it varies for each machine for some additional funds to make sure we can maintain this equipment correctly.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Michael.
What does the grinder do for the landfill?
The grinder, yeah,
We grind construction demolition debris. Approximately 80% of the construction demo that comes in gets ground. We're permitted by the state to use it as an alternative daily cover. So every night we have to cover the waste. Instead of using soil, 5 nights a week we use this ground up C&D material.
So you have garbage, you know, from the garbage trucks and everything from households. That's put down, compacted, and then you have, you divert the construction materials to a grinder and you grind those up, and then you cover the pile. And why do you cover the pile?
It's required by federal and state law. It keeps vectors out, keeps bears out, keeps the birds out, keeps the odor down. It's just a requirement.
Patty?
I have a question regarding this new equipment, and I think I understand it. If we were to go in this direction, bring it back into the county, into the fold, so to speak, and in 5 years we realized it's really not working as well as we thought, we would then still have the opportunity to sell that equipment, recover some of our costs, and depending upon how well we maintain it, et cetera, would determine the money we would get back and could back into the.
To answer that, when we buy equipment, we typically get a 5, a 7, and a 10-year guaranteed buyback for any equipment we purchase. And so as long as it's in a certain hour range, year range, and condition, we will get that allotted figure back.
I want to, thinking about the risk involved for doing this, major expense to the county. And, I know we have the option to, in 5 years or 3 years or 10 years or 20 years, to say, we're going to go back to this system or we're going to come into this system. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jonah, do you have any sense of the hours of operation, or project, not hours of operation, the years of service of the equipment?
Yes, and that was due to the loader and the excavator. We were going to be purchasing one of each of those for the aggregate operation. So we're going to have the ability to mingle those 2 units and then share those hours so that we can make the longest life and most cost effective for the county.
Because all these different items, it shows a 10-year projected years of service.
Other than the compactor.
Other than the compactor.
Correct.
And then that puts it off the end of the chart for when we'd have to be replacing stuff.
And that could vary drastically. We take a different aspect to when we replace things depending on cost and resale, along with other factors. How much uptime is it? How much is it broken? Lots of variables go into those decisions. If the hours aren't getting put on these units, they could be 15 years, 16 years, longer. If they're getting hammered on and lots of hours and hard use, it could be sooner.
Would you have to take the equipment to the fleet shop to work on stuff, or would you be able to work on stuff out there?
We would be using our service truck.
Rachel?
Well, just to clarify what I think was said or restate it, these purchase prices that you have in here are also including some, did you say, replacement parts or the rebuild type of
Correct.
Numbers are being included in the capital of the purchase price. So that's an important point.
Michael?
It seemed to me the largest argument in the last discussion we had, at least from people who've been on the project, was that the county was limiting their risk by going with a contractor. You had a fixed price within a range, and the county wasn't going to sustain any risk at all. With the county projections, you had risks, and we've answered some of those questions just now. So So how do you answer that question? So we have projections, and I see lots of projections. We just had a whole 24 pages of projection. How do you feel about assuming that risk as a county department?
It's a good question, and I think that we've studied this thoroughly, and I think that from a public perspective, it's the right thing to do because I think it provides a more agile department. I think you'll hear in the Summit County story that they've been able to take on new programs because of the capacity that's built into the organization then. We've created a very conservative pro forma here. We think that based on the amount of material that's coming in the landfill that we will cover our costs and save money. And that if there is a downturn in the economy, that savings can be brought into the organization. I think the benefits of having the public, having our public organization do this work outweighs the risks that have been communicated here. I don't see it being that risky of an endeavor. And if it comes to pass in 5 years from now that we go, wow, we were just completely wrong and we are way over our head, we can sell the equipment and hire a contractor to do the work then. This is not a decision that's being made forever. This is a decision that's being made in the 5 to 10 year time frame. I just don't see the risk that's there.
You don't see the risk for the county?
For the county, I don't
So then, would you be willing to come back after a year's worth of operation, bring these figures in, and say, we're at this point, in our projections, or we're not at this point? And so we essentially, and we'd do it anyway in effect, but this would make, I mean, would you be willing to do that?
I would expect to have to do that. I would be expected to be held accountable for this decision.
Okay, let's see, Kathy, were you going to speak, or should we have our guest from Summit County?
Well, I have a few things to answer. Jonah, are you done?
We might be back to you.
Yeah, we might be back to you, Jonah. Don't leave.
And just after Jonah's presentation, I just kind of wanted to clarify our fund balance. I checked with Finance Department, and this is what is presented to our auditors this year. We have a fund balance, a bank account essentially of $3,029,000. And then we have a post-closure care fund of $3,074,000. We're very healthy financially. And just to give you some perspective of how well we're doing this year, we went almost $1 million over our budgeted revenue projections for last year. This year, first 4 months of the year, we're $400,000 ahead of where we were last year. So we're having a good year. If it keeps up, we'll have more in our fund balance. So healthy financially. So
That's good to know.
Jonah's numbers are scary. So I just wanted to address as well the management of staff overtime. It was brought up that we should project $50,000 in overtime annually. However, that's not the case. The Solid Waste Center is open 40 to 50 hours a week, season dependent. We're open longer in the summer hours, with additional operations occurring before opening and after closing. So in total, the Solid Waste Center is staffed by county employees approximately 56 hours a week. We have 9 employees on site. 5 of those employees are equipment operators. I'm not one of the 5. So 5 of them are equipment operators. So how we manage that, we stagger shifts. And that allows us to cover all shifts during opening to closing and making sure we have people on site. We will continue to do that. In the event we do move forward with taking over the county operations, we'll hire an additional 4 experienced equipment operators. And again, we'll follow that staggered shifting and limit our overtime. We do budget for overtime for our current operations. Covers, sick leave, vacation, just unexpected emergencies where staff might have to be out. And we will continue to do that. It won't be anywhere near $50,000. So we really try and manage that. So even with this added department flexibility, the complement of 4 additional equipment operators this program is enough to cover our operational needs as we project them. For instance, the working face requires 3 employees at all times, running equipment, managing, spotting. So that's Monday through Friday, that's approximately 10 hours a day, and then 1 employee on Saturday for 5 hours during the summer months, 3 to 4 hours during the winter months. So it's about 155 required labor hours per week. So the proposed 4 full-time employees we would hire provide 160 hours a week. So we have coverage, and we can avoid those overtime costs. In addition, there were some questions brought up, but do we have the experience to do this? And lack the safety knowledge of the understanding the hazards of the landfill. In reality, we have plenty of experience in heavy equipment operations, as well as a comprehensive knowledge on regulations and safety. With this additional budget, we'll bring in $20,000 a year just for training costs. So we belong to a number of professional associations. We believe big time in training, health and safety training, equipment operations training. So, this county allows us to provide that very generous support to our employees. It's hugely important because things are changing in this industry all the time. So we have 5 equipment operators. They have 62 years of combined equipment operation experience. They've proven to be extremely adaptable in learning new things. They want to learn new things. Sometimes I have to pull them back. They get a little too gung-ho. Jonah, included in the equipment purchase price is training. So if we bought a compactor, because there are nuances to this different equipment, these equipment companies will come out and train staff on how to operate their equipment properly. Safety has become a huge priority for the Solid Waste Center. We have implemented a comprehensive safety program for the site. This includes a summary of all site operations, standard operating procedures, an emergency response plan, required personal protective equipment that employees and staff must be wearing at all times when they're out on site, list of required safety training. All our operational staff, including me, have been 40-hour OSHA HAZWOPER certified, and we're all current on our 8-hour annual refresher. That's huge. We're not, as a county, not required to follow OSHA mandates. However, as a county, as the Solid Waste Center, we look to exceed that regulatory expectation. And we like to carry that through all the regulatory expectations of the site. In addition, there was some questioning of whether we have the experience to operate a landfill. My personal resume, I have 23 years experience on hazardous and solid waste management sites. I've worked in 7 different countries on probably 24 sites, landfill sites, on operations and management plans. And some of these places, they're not really called landfills, they're dumps. They're all on fire. So there were some particular challenges there. Prior to coming here, I worked for one of the top solid waste engineering management firms in the country. I worked for them for 10 years. I managed 17 landfill gas, operation and maintenance of landfill gas systems on the East Coast. I'm board certified environmental scientist in solid waste management. I'm only the 2nd person in the state of Colorado to get that certification. I'm a manager of landfill operations certified, compost operations certified, and I have an MBA, so I know the business of landfill. I don't know everything, so we have contracted with Weaver Consulting Group. They're our contracted engineering firm. I confer with him frequently because there's things I don't know, so they provide their input as well as engineering, design, and operations for our site as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Aaron because I believe, Rachel, you last week said it's chicken and an egg. We don't know if we can do it because we've never done it. 12 years ago, Summit County went through the same experience, and so we thought it'd be valuable for him to kind of give his perspective. So, if it's okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, let's do questions for you, Kathy, first.
One of the pieces of equipment I don't see here is a watering truck for the roads. That's been an issue for me for a long time. Do we have a watering truck, and will we be able to control dust at the landfill?
We just recently got one that is part of taking over the aggregate operations.
And will it be used for dust suppression at the landfill?
Extensively,
Extensively. Okay.
We will take over, whether or not we take over the operations or contractor, the watering of the roads. A contractor would be responsible for the area just around the working phase. But yeah,
Kathy, on the operation of the landfill, you have 5 days a week, you have 3 people working on the face. And then on Saturday, you only have 1 person. How do you get away with that? And
That poor
why don't
person.
you need more people on Saturday?
Saturday is generally a little quieter. You don't have all the commercial trucks coming through. It's mostly household, and then filling some trucks with aggregate. So right now Heartland has 1 person doing the working phase, filling trucks with aggregate. We still have 1 to 2 county employees there as well, assisting, so. It's just a quieter day in general.
So the household waste comes in and people throw it out, me included, throw it out into the big pile. Does it sit there till Monday and then get ground, or does it get ground on
Construction
Saturday?
demolition debris, it would most likely be, it would sit there. It's not putrescible is what they call it, it's not the stinky waste. It's household waste that has to be buried and covered, the municipal solid waste they call.
So does the 1 person who is there working on the face then run the compactor and then get the dirt and do the weekly dirt cover at the end of the day?
Correct, daily, so yeah. About 15 minutes before we close the gate, we start cutting people off, just so we can get them out before the gate closes. And then at that time, they start cleaning up the working face, getting the cover on it. So generally, the person working the working face is going to be there about half hour after closing, just to make sure everything's buttoned up.
And how much dirt do you have to push on Saturday afternoon when you shut the gate?
A 6-inch soil cover.
And do you have that dirt all piled up there?
We have a stockpile. We get a lot of dirt and rock material in from all these basements being dug. So we segregate that out to crushable, that goes to the aggregate crushing. That red clay stuff that's not good for anything, that usually gets put into the cover dirt pile. And then if we get a good topsoil in, that gets separated out to our screenable pile, and that's what we make our topsoil and potting soil product with. And then we also have a borrow area at the top of the landfill. It's a knob of soil and shale material that we can pull from.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back for a moment on the hours, and the 4 additional employees would create 160 hours. How does lunch hour or, break fit into that? Do they really work a 9-hour day with a half-hour lunch and 2 15-minute breaks? Or, an 8-hour day, I think it's required by law to have a certain number of breaks.
They actually, popular with the crew, and it's their option, we do 4 10-hours. So they'll be there at 6 in the morning till 4:30 or a little later, so they get that half-hour lunch break included, and then they take a morning break and an afternoon break.
Okay, so again, I'm just kind of wondering, is the 160 hours then really minus 4 1-hour breaks? And, so it's not, so it would be 160 hours, working hours.
That's right, those are working hours.
Right.
Breaks and lunchtime is additional.
Okay, on your own time. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Next part.
Now let's move on to Summit County.
Okay, Aaron Burns.
Well, Board, first of all, thank you for allowing me to come over. And I want to say I want to commend you all, because I remember 12 years ago sitting in the same meetings with our board and having these discussions. And we had a lot of research and we had a lot of homework to do. So my hat's off to your staff here, because Brian and Jonah and Kathy, I feel have really done a lot of research and have done their homework on this. And I really thought maybe it would be important that I would be able to give you a little background and touch on our experience and maybe help reinforce this decision, because I really feel that they're on track, and I support that. 12 years ago, we took over our operations in Summit County. From 1981 to 2004, our landfill was always owned by Summit County, but contracted out. We had multiple contractors over the years that ran the day-to-day operations. At the end of the day, the part that I think is important and part of this discussion is, as the county, we are responsible for that landfill. We are responsible for the day-to-day operations, even though somebody else may be operating that landfill. and we are responsible for the liability and post-closure of that landfill. So during these times, you know, the landfill is being contracted out, the county was reviewing the different contracts and looking at the fill sequence and looking at the operations, and really started to get some concerns because that we were not meeting the compliance side of things to maintain our landfill. So around 2004, the county took a real hard look and evaluated, was it worthwhile to run the operations ourselves and consume and take care of all the functionality of the landfill and run the day-to-day operations on top of being responsible for closing our landfill at the end of the day. And it was decided that we would take over operations. When we were going through this process, I must say, we had a smaller operation at the time. We were hovering around that 50,000 ton mark, pretty small landfill. And I do want to say, I don't want to get off track, but Kathy gave me a tour today, and very proud of your landfill. It's a very, very nice operation. So I want you guys to know that. So we, you know, we took a hard look at the landfill, and we took a hard look at the operations, and wanted to really see what it would take for us to bring everything back into compliance, get things where they need to be, and then as operators, what does it take to maintain this landfill? Well, we were only a landfill operation at that time, and about a half year later, it was decided that we would start a dual stream material recovery facility as well, and bring in staff, and you know, really the county, the board passed adopted a zero waste ordinance at that time. So we had a lot of goals and incentives for the county to increase that diversion rate. So it would benefit the county to really have a team and some unity and bring everybody together to really focus on those goals per our board. So during that process, we started evaluating, you know, the cost and staff and what we needed to do. And I got to tell you up front, we were a little nervous because there was some costs that, you know, we weren't expecting, that we weren't sure, you know, what we're getting into. But we really, you know, we put some things together. We had our engineers assist us at that time with some of these cost evaluations, and we developed a budget. And it was decided that we would take over and we would move forward. So we decided to do that. We started operating the landfill with a 10-person staff, and that's including our gatehouse. We went through that process, and it was very successful. We had, you know, I don't want to say control, but we were able to focus on every aspect of our operation and meet the goals that we as a county set for moving forward. During that time, our county, we trying to achieve these diversion goals and reach a higher diversion, we created programs internally, composting, a commercial composting operation, HHW, special waste collection programs, all these different programs. And that was something to really, you know, for us to realize, you know, we need more staff. We need, you know, these costs that initially we weren't really anticipating on growing into these different programs, which it looks like Pickens County already has a lot of these programs in process, and they're on track. But, you know, during this process, it was eye-opening to the county that we found, and again, I'm not here today to talk about the contractors. All contractors are not the same, all contractors, but we had some bad experiences with contractors. And during this process, when we took over our operation, we found a lot of errors and things that did not happen or take place to meet the contractual agreements. And it really ended up being issues for us, because now that's the past, and here we are as owners that we have to get these things maintained, take care of the issues, and address these things. And I really feel for the county, it was benefiting for us, because at the end of the day, we are liable. We are the owners of that landfill. And as you know, to protect the groundwater impacts, the environment, we need to make sure that those landfills are operated in a proper manner. and to meet the compliance, the regulatory, they're changing day to day. I mean, air quality, emission standards, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. So to keep up with that, we just, we felt it was necessary that we would run that operation and maintain that and just stay in compliance. During that process, initially we found a lot of things wrong that we had to go in and correct, and it cost us a lot of money. And it was an eye-opener to us to really have a good understanding how things have not been run properly over the years. So that allowed us to develop a staff, get the right equipment, and really do what we need to do to maintain and manage a well-run operation in Summit County. Board, I think it's important. I'd just like to add a couple things because I don't know how much time we have. And I just, last night, I put together some things because, this 12 years ago. It was a while ago when we went through this process, but I went through some of my notes, and maybe I could point out just a couple advantages and disadvantages. So I'm pretty open book, and I just want everyone, I feel that talking with Brian and Kathy, just so you guys all know what to expect. And to Summit County, there was the advantages outweighed the disadvantages by a long stretch. But there are some disadvantages. But I want to point out those advantages to you because I feel the questions that you've asked are all valid and good questions. And we have something in common because it was a while ago when we went through this same process. So some of the advantages that I notated, I mentioned earlier, the county accepts, at the end of the day, past, present, or future, we accept the liability for our landfill. And that's important. And I know a lot of contractors that run landfills in a very good way, and they do a very good job. And it's just, as a county, we're responsible for that. So we want to make sure that those, that landfill is operated in a safe and least amount of environmental impacts and run in a good manner. Summit County solid waste operation is primarily an enterprise fund, very similar to Pitkin County. Some tax dollars have been allocated to help make up a shortfall within our recycling operations over the years. It sounds like you guys have privatized that, and I feel that's a good move. Let the pros work in that area. We've struggled with the recycling side. We've changed over the years and developed to where the program has been more. We've been able to cover those costs, but it's hard to say. For us. The recycling program has been a huge success in Summit County and more demand for that, and we are reaching higher diversion goals in Summit County. So the county had a very good pulse at the beginning on our overall budget, which helps reduce any of the unknowns for the future of our facility and the operations. After absorbing operations, county staff was able to identify the issues, the problematic sources, that may never have been identified by the contractor or never covered under these contracts. These items could have been resulted in regulatory compliance issues with CDPHE or resulted in a hefty price tag during the closure process. A lot of these things may not have been identified during the time they were contracted, but we soon found out after the contract, here are the things that we need to go in and we need to fix. Staff was able to work with a contracted engineer and develop a good working relationship to keep the county's best interest a #1 priority. Predict and forecast any large capital expenses, including future cell construction, project related to diversion goals, or new regulation requirements per CDPHE and the EPA. Creating a master plan for our operation to reflect the county's goals going forward. Truly understanding this operation inside and out. There's a lot of things where when people operate landfills, not knowing the inners and what's really happening, and it's important as operators that we know that. And as your county staff, I feel, has a very good handle on the insides and outs, of your operation. Knowing the issues and having a staff you can count on. If there is a way to extend the life of our landfill in our county, our staff was dedicated to make this happen while focusing on the day-to-day operations as well. developing programs within the operation, and having unity in the same team achieving these same goals. Summit County Resource Allocation Park, SCRAP, which is us, consists of a Subtitle D CDPHE and EPA regulated landfill. We collect the source separated materials from drop-off centers throughout the county. We are a single stream transfer MRF. We are a Class 1 biosolid and food scrap commercial composting operation. We also, within the 466 acres of our landfill, we have a motorcycle motocross, and we also have a shooting range, archery, rifle, and a shotgun range. Pistol, public area for the public, for the shooting range, and then our local law enforcement also has a range, so they're able to train up there. So we have a lot of things happening on that 466 acres, a lot of good things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for a landfill that has a life expectancy, we all dread to look at that day when our landfill is going to close. I mean, we really want to maximize that airspace, and achieving those high densities in a landfill operation and really managing that. And I feel, as we move forward, I don't know about Pickens County, but Summit County, we don't have another place for a landfill, and we're unable to build a new landfill in Summit County. So it's very important that we look at that, so we don't have to come back to our board and say, board, we need to zone this property for landfilling, and that we want to do everything we can to maximize that airspace. So I want to touch on 3 of the disadvantages that I notated. It can be difficult at times operationally and financially, and we had our obstacles throughout the last 12 years, but we've managed to get through them, and we've had a good board, the support, and we had a good staff, and we got a good team, so we're able to get through those things. We discovered many issues up front, and we were not really prepared. The items we may have put off over the years, the items that were put off over the years were not part of the contract. We found out after we looked into things further, this was not something that the contractor was required to do, or maybe they were required to do this, but they didn't do that. So we identified a lot of those issues after the fact. The county realized the severity of several of these issues and had to address them immediately. Truly understanding how vague the landfill contracts can be and how some of these contractors have benefited over the years, no real liability or risk on their end, and most of these are based on, most contracts are based on a per ton or per year model, so they're paid that way. Not really having a clear understanding of the operation up front and not having some of the historical information needed. Us, Summit County, we didn't have some of that stuff. And when we went to the contractor to try to get some of that stuff, it was very hard for us to get that information. So that was that we weren't expecting. We thought maybe they would have all the stuff archived or notated somewhere, or maps or data, and none of that stuff. None of that stuff was available. So, anyways, I feel that I want to just let you guys know. I've talked to Kathy a little bit, and I've been able to talk to Brian, and I support what the decision of the county running their operations, and at the end of the day, I feel confident that you guys can do it, and I feel that you have a very well run and managed operation, and have a good staff here that's capable of doing it. And I guess at the end of the day, I just want to let you know, if we can do it, you guys can do it. So, and we've been able to get through it. So, go ahead.
Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your presentation, and glad to hear your success. Can you tell me, were there budget savings between what the county ended up paying to run its own service and what it had been in a contract basis, or were those, I realize it's not apples to apples because you were adding programs and doing additional things, but if you can give us a rough idea of how did it work out financially?
So up front, we had a lot of those capital high costs. Throughout the years, we've been able to recover those costs. So we, initially, that was the eye opener for us. You know, we got this capital, you know, we had a couple things hit us where maybe it's not necessarily the case for Pickens County, but we, shortly after we invested, we had all the capital costs on equipment, we had to develop a cell, a new lined area to put trash in. So we would have had to absorb that anyways, but it kind of was a,
It wasn't an intended cost.
yeah, so it just happened sooner than we thought. So you know, we had those initial costs, but once we got through those costs over a 3 to 5 year period, we started recovering a lot of those costs, being able to operate and do things internally. It was a cost savings to the county for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to follow up on that, so when you first, thank you again for coming over. But when you first decided to, or think about taking over the operation, the county, did you also then do an RFP and try to do some comparisons in terms of costs and savings?
No, our contract was up, so, not the county, but the contractor that was operating the landfill. So that's when we decided to run the operations completely on our own.
Okay, so you didn't go out to bid just
No.
to have some sort of comparison in terms of what the cost would be or savings?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to add my thanks too for you making the trip over. Where is the landfill in Summit County?
So we are on Highway 6, right before you get into Keystone. So
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, just on the east side of Lake Dillon there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
400 and some acres? Wow. How big is ours?
63 acres?
Can you give us a little few of your acres from over there?
Sure. I was telling Kathy, maybe you guys can give us some of your dirt. So
Yeah.
We'll take their
we
word,
need dirt, yeah. But, and something else too, you know, I offered to your staff, I mean, you know, we've learned some things over the years, and we got a very good crew, and, you know, I feel that, you know, it's a learning experience, and we've got through it. And, you know, if their staff or your staff would ever want to come up and do a site tour of our facility, and we'd be willing to, you know, take it as far as we love. I know they would do the same thing for us, but to have their staff come up and spend some time with our you know, operators and just kind of get a feel for, you know, the things that we do. And, you know, every landfill is different in its unique way, but we'd be more than willing to offer some training or any type of, you know, site visits to see what we do. And we're proud of our facility, just like these guys are proud of your facility. And, you know, if anyone wanted to come up and take an opportunity to spend some time there, we're willing to do that as well.
Well, I'm going to be over that way next week, so if you leave a card, I might call you, since I'm just going over there for a lunch, and so it means I'll have an afternoon. It might be nice since I'm in the neighborhood, but I'll let you know. I won't just drop in.
That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Also, I took advantage of taking the tour and then getting to shoot at the shooting range at the CCI meeting in June, and that was, I mean, we had a really good tour, and it was really well worth my time going to see your facility.
You didn't go out in the motocross track?
No, we didn't do the motocross. Maybe this year. My question is, what is your bottom line right now? Are you making money, or are you losing money on the landfill, breaking even?
Landfill, yes. Composting, yes. And recycling is slowly getting there. The county recently passed a 1A measure for water quality, and the residents, that passed. It was voted yes. And Summit County is now offering a free electronic waste, HHW, all special waste, free to all residents in Summit County. And that's to protect our water quality initiative there in Summit County. And anyways, yes, this year we did very well, and we're moving that direction in recycling. The commodity markets in recycling, you know, we could get in. It's tough. It's, you know, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, we're just recovering from the shoreman strike on the West Coast. Things were backed up there, and commodities were decreasing. Pulp mills in the states have closed down due to contamination of glass and single stream recycling. And, you know, we recently just jumped into the single stream recycling at our MRF minus glass. And, you know, we're getting a lot of community involvement. You know, we're seeing the glass increase at our public recycling drop-off centers, which is a plus, and we're getting a higher value for our single stream because we're reducing that contamination as well to improve all the other commodities within single stream recycling. So, you know, that's been a big learning curve for our community, but we're on track and we're getting good support on that. So it's just, you know, the recycling program is, we have a great program in Summit County like you guys do here in Pickens County, but, you know, there's been a mindset for years that recycling should be free. And we all know the benefits of recycling, but there's a lot of handling involved in recycling, and there's a cost associated with that. And how we can get our culture and people to, you know, get their hands around that, that's a challenge in itself. But we're moving that direction, and we're trying to educate people and just, you know, move forward. But yes, we did good this year. So,
John?
So we've been focusing on the expense side, and thank you for making the trip over here and sharing your experience with us. What's happened on the fee side with you? What are you seeing big increases after you did this? What happens on the customer side there?
So initially, you know, Summit County, we have a pretty high fee structure. We're one of the higher ones in the state. We have not raised our rates, I want to say, for 5 years. Okay. We maintain, you know, we don't feel that, you know, we can raise our rates anymore. We're at that point to where we, you know, we're pretty high, and we cover our costs. We know what our cost of construction is, what our cost of design is, what our cost is operationally. But we, you know, increasing our rates right now is not a good solution for you know, it's just, it doesn't work in our model. So I would anticipate that we'll stick with that rate years to come. So, but yes, to answer your question, you know, the first 5 years, we increased our rates probably about $5 a ton. So we have a unique rate structure where we have a charge for loose and compacted. We just don't have a straight across the board rate. So we increased that both loose and rate structure. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
There are, the same time you guys were thinking about our questions from last time, I know that the private vendors who had bid on the thing were probably thinking about the same questions and potential answers to that. And I'd like to give an opportunity for any of the people who bid on the project to make comments right now. And we have about 15 more minutes, and we'd have to wrap it up on this discussion. So, Larry and Dorothea, just so I get a...
I'm getting up to say something here.
Okay, just so I have a sense of, Dave, did you want to make any comments today or not?
I'll let them go, and then depending on what your time situation is, I'll be respectful of that either way.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
So, for the record, identify yourself, please.
Larry Drew, CEO of Heartland Environmental Services. To your point, Patty, I agree with you about your comment about Dorothea. When since she come to work for me, I feel like a 6th grade grammar. So
She's good at it too.
Oh God. I would just like to open up by saying I'm not here to point any fingers or be antagonistic in any way, shape, or form. I'm here to give you my opinion, what I believe are facts and beliefs in that. So I just want to open on that. I would like to pass out a little spreadsheet we did, or not spreadsheet, but a thing you had asked about Western County landfills, or Western state landfills before. And we did a quick little study to identify all the landfills in western Colorado on the western slope, who owns them, who operates them, and some of the information on the internet may be dated, but whether they make money or not. Some of them made a little bit of money, some of them lost money. We called it break even. Some information was available. And I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but most of the operations that are privately operated made money, and most of the operations that were publicly operated did not make money. So before I get started, I'd like to comment on the situation in Summit. I'm very, very familiar with that. Back in the early 2000s, I bid on it when a gentleman by the name of Les Lyman was operating it. I agree that it wasn't a very good landfill. It wasn't run very well. There was all sorts of problems out there. I did not get the bid. Another company get the bid. They lowballed it. The county chose to take the lower price. And again, they had problems with that operator, and 3 years later, they got rid of him. The gentleman in charge of that process at that time was a guy by the name of Rick Poches. He worked for me a short time after he left Summit County, so I got to know the situation even better. And he regretted, obviously, taking the lowball price, and he got what he paid for. Back then, when we looked at it, they charged by the yard, and it was about $8 a yard. There's all sorts of standards, conversion standards you can use, but it's about 4 to 1. So it's about $32 a ton if you try to convert it to tonnage. The county put scales in, converted to tons, and today I believe they're at, from $32 a ton, they're at, I believe, around $78 a ton. Very high price. And a year ago, Dorothea and I met with a commissioner over there and the assistant county manager, and they had just implemented a privatization program in their fleet maintenance and were very, very happy with us. And they were talking to us about privatizing the operation of their landfill because it was losing $400,000 a year, and they're having to subsidize it out of general revenue and a recycle tax that they put into place. So that's my side of the story over there. I've been to the landfill. It's great. They do a great job. They're a lot smaller volume-wise than Pitkin is. And so sometimes that's easier to manage, sometimes it's harder to manage because you have the same price equipment managing smaller volume, smaller revenue. So that's my take on that situation. Like I said, they do a great job. But I just wanted to share that with you, that there has been some conversation regarding privatizing the operation. I'd like to start with a document that was put out, and I'm going to try to be brief. If you go to the agenda item summary, under equipment purchase price and replacement, they suggest that there's a $600,000 savings on the county's ability to purchase equipment. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. For example, in the price of equipment for that grinder, they got $700,000 in there. I can buy it for $584,000. Made the call today. That's recent information. I have 2 of them. So I think there's some benefits sometimes. I think other times, depends on the dealer. If it's CAT, I think they offer, maybe Dockstead does not. I don't know if that's the case or not. But in cases where I try to compete, I buy late model used equipment. And that, I save hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that versus buying new. So there's a trade-off there. So I just wanted to address that issue. Under equipment hourly rate, I agree with them where 40% is fuel cost. They say they save 5 cents a gallon versus the private sector. I got an email from Fred Collette, who owns Collette Fuel. This is to confirm Pitkin County Waste is receiving the same price of number 2 diesel fuel as Pitkin County. So I buy at the same price as the county. It says the cost of servicing the equipment in-house is at least $22 per hour or less. That's probably true. I do most of my services and minor repairs with my equipment operators. I don't have that cost. Major repairs, they're going to call Caterpillar or Komatsu or whoever they're dealing with, just like I do. So I don't know if that's an issue. I receive discount on tires and filters, just like a lot of people do. The taxes, that's correct. I don't pay taxes, or I do pay taxes, and the county doesn't. The next issue, management of staff overtime. There's a statement in the second paragraph. In short, the 9 equipment operators will provide the county labor capacity and flexibility to avoid overtime. I agree with that. What I don't agree with is the fact that the additional operators that aren't budgeted in the spreadsheet aren't accounted for in the spreadsheet in order to cover overtime, vacation. They're taking that from the 5 existing operators they have. So on an apples-to-apples comparison, that is actually overtime. They have to hire a half a person or a full person to cover the vacation, which they have more than my people get. The actual overtime that the hours of landfill dictate. And so there is a cost there that's not reflected in their spreadsheet. So whether you call it overtime or additional people, I just want to bring that to their attention. The other thing I want to bring to attention is up on that first paragraph there, it says 5 of the employees are equipment operators currently at the landfill. That they manage the household hazardous waste program and the food waste program. We still handle the compost program. That's a job for 2 operators. Just last week, 1 operator ran most of the operation. They've had 5 operators since single stream went into effect. And once it took over and got an automatic pilot, then the need for 5 operators went away, but they still carried 5 operators. And that's a year and a half ago. There's another 6 months to go. That's a $500,000 cost that the county's absorbed, keeping people employed, waiting to take over the operations of the landfill. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If my company right now was to do everything out there, I'd hire 1 more person. I'd do it all with 5 people. And HHW and everything. So that's a comparison I want you to look at. You know, if you talk about savings at single stream, well, I don't know what those. The next thing, staff experience, I just want to point out one small thing. They talk about heavy equipment operation, not landfill equipment operation. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And the people they've had out there that I've been around for 16 years have operated equipment. They've operated a rubber tire loader and a skid steer. And that's all they've operated, to my knowledge. I haven't seen them operate anything else. So the issue of safety comes back and the ability to operate this equipment. So, you know, she says down here, there's a combined 62 years of experience in heavy equipment. That's probably true, but it's not landfill heavy equipment. Second and last paragraph before the summary. Staff are well informed on the requirements of operating a landfill within a strict regulatory environment. I've had, within the last year or so, a meeting with John and Brian to talk about issues like that needed to be addressed, were addressed, taken care of, and it was me that brought them to the attention of the manager and the public works director. I believe having 2 sets of eyes out there looking at issues helps cover the liability and exposure of the county versus 1 set of eyes that if they make a mistake they can cover it up. That's the situation that exists now. There's 2 sets of eyes out there. There's the county's eyes and there's our eyes. And if we don't think things are being done right, we go to John. And if we're not doing things right, they definitely come to us, trust me. So as far as Kathy's experience, it's an impressive resume. I can't argue with her. What I can argue is nobody else has much of an operation management resume that's out there. Since I've been here 16 years ago, we've had 3 county managers, 2 public works directors, 3 solid waste managers, 3 environmental consultants. Within the last few years, 5 people have been terminated and several people have left to move to Road and Bridge or some other division. We've been the only constant out there. By going this route, all your eggs are in one basket. What happens if Kathy packs up and moves to Jackson Hole? What happened? About 8 or 10 years ago, this issue came up in front of the board. Same staff wanted to take over operations. And this issue was the main issue where the commissioners voted not to have staff take it over because they said, solid waste manager, what happens if you go away? Who's going to manage it? And it was It happened to be at a time when, if the economy was booming, people were hard to get, oil field was booming. And so it's a valid point. All your eggs are in one basket, one person, the way this lays out to me. So that's my comments on that. I'd like to go through an exercise that hopefully won't take too long. I'd like to pass out 2 spreadsheets. One is the original, and it's bigger than the one you got, so you can read it better, because I'm old and I need glasses. So the top one is the original Pitkin County spreadsheet that staff provided. The second spreadsheet is the same spreadsheet except for the articles highlighted in yellow. And so I'll walk through those changes briefly and explain why. If you see up at the very top, there's a line of yellow that goes 0%, 6%, 6%. We disagree that in the cost per hour that there was a negative 20% in the original one, that's discounted because of warranties. When you go to a CAT book or you go to find a cost per hour, those warranties, undercarriage replacement, things like that are factored into that cost, so it's averaged. So there's no discount, 20% year 1, 10% year 2, it's averaged throughout. So we changed that to make it equal across. Like I talked about overtime earlier, I still say there's a cost there, even though it may not be overtime for those 4 people. There's a cost to service that landfill. So I put that in there. Our hours are 1,240 hours a year. Those are actual. So we just guessed at a rate, $35. I think it's in the ballpark. The CAT 816 compactor, the hours on that, that's actual. That's off my machine. The bulldozer D6N, that's 1,000 hours. That's actual. It was 500 hours in the other one. What we changed, and this is a significant item, is we changed the life expectancy of 3 pieces of equipment. I did not change the hours from the county. I moved it from 10 years to 7 years because in my estimation, 15,600 hours is way, way past the life of those 3 pieces of equipment, in particular, the grinder. I also changed the hours for the haul truck. I increased that to 750. Those highlighted hour numbers are actuals. If you go down to the year 2023, there's a yellow highlighted column of $2,400,030, $413,030. That is the replacement cost of not only the CAT compactor, but those other 3 pieces of equipment. So if you put this into the model, the county's model, if you go over to the blue highlighted area, that's how much more the county would end up costing them versus bidder number 1, $1.3 million. Now, in order to, I'm going to pass out 2 more things to you, and they're 2 letters. One is from a third-party landfill expert that's had 25 years in the business, working for a very large publicly traded company, that has been to the site because he's interested in the C&D operation of implementing it in his landfill. He's run many, many landfills in the Midwest and in the New England area, and he looked at the spreadsheet, the county spreadsheet, and went over all of that, and I think in summary, he really questions the equipment replacement stuff, and he really stresses safety. And he said typically landfill equipment is depreciated over a 5 to 7 year period, not 10 years. So I want you to read that, and then the second letter is from the largest, if not the largest, the second largest heavy equipment dealer in the state of Colorado. And it is their opinion letter about the creating 30% maintenance savings over 3 years, the discounted amount, the equipment replacement schedule, and in particular the C&D grinder, where he says it's an 8,000 to 10,000 hour life. So this is from a guy that's had 19 years in selling equipment in the construction, mining, and landfill business. We showed him a copy of that spreadsheet, and he said there's no way that equipment's going to last 15,000 hours in that harsh environment. That grinder sits in dust all day long. the excavator feeding it sits in dust all day long. That shortens the life of the engine substantially. So, that's sort of the highlights of this. There's a lot of information I ran down your throat very quickly. I apologize for that, but we don't have much time. I got some backup letters. Like I said, I plugged in real numbers, actuals here. They are what they are. And in my model that I did for this RFP, I have replacement equipment in there. You have to. Otherwise, you end up going broke. So I want to thank you for the time you give me. If you have any questions. Dorothy, you did edit these?
I could tell.
You did that. No questions?
George?
Yes.
Not for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I think in the interest of time, we need to have discussion amongst ourselves now, and if anybody,
Well, I've got a question, if it wasn't to Larry, that's all.
oh, you have a question for Larry? Oh, okay, go ahead,
It
George.
wasn't to you, Larry. It was not to you.
Oh.
But Larry brought up some points in terms of looking at the way we budgeted in for heavy equipment, from the purchase to longevity to the maintenance. So road and bridge, when you come before us for budget and you need to look at replacement equipment or maintenance, or when the airport comes before us for their large equipment, for maintenance, for purchase, it's got to be sort of a similar exercise. I mean, heavy equipment is heavy equipment. There may be different uses, but when you look at some of the heavy large equipment that road and bridge uses or the airport, which are substantial capital expenses, how does that work out in terms of your projections from the budget to longevity to the maintenance?
The numbers we put together are showing a more extreme environment, as Larry speaks of. So we've upped those numbers compared to what we pay currently for operations at the airport and landfill. Or sorry, the airport and road and bridge.
George, is what you're asking is how does what we budget for road and bridge stack up to reality? Are you looking for kind of a...
Right, knowing that they have to buy similar, different equipment, but they're still heavy equipment.
No, the numbers are there. Those are the numbers that we're paying. You know, we're paying less than these numbers for our road and bridge and airport operations.
And our projections of that equipment and its operating time and its longevity, how does that work out based on reality?
Like what I was talking about earlier, you know, the reality is, you know, we didn't have the exact numbers that Larry is talking about. We had to guesstimate, you know, and we're trying to guesstimate off of having redundancy of multiple units, so we're trying to spread those hours across a couple of units because we didn't have the exact numbers, you know, and then trying to put in extra funds, you know, for rebuilds or unknowns that may arise.
Maybe I can take a shot at answering the question, which is with regard to our capital replacement plan and our estimated life cycle costing of equipment, we're right on. Most of the time, the equipment lasts a little longer than we expect because we're conservative in our estimates. We don't want to come to the board and ask for more money because something's worn out more quickly. So with regard to the airport and road and bridge, we're usually right on with that estimate of life cycle costing.
That and additionally, when we purchased new, you know, you gain a lot of benefits from owning the machine from the get-go, and you know exactly what's gone wrong with it and exactly where it's been and what's happened. When you buy used, you run risks of unknowns, and you end up with different problems or unknown problems. When you own it brand new, you can see that whole life.
And what has allowed that to happen is our preventative maintenance program and replacing things in a timely manner, oil with air filters, that type of thing, and making sure that machine is running as efficiently and effectively as possible based on manufacturer's direction.
Then Connie, from a financial point of view, we recently did set up a whole new department with IT. And so you had to run through, your department had to run through different pro formas, what that would cost, and the savings that would incur as we separated our operation from the city. So that IT's been in place now for a little over a year or so,
No, it just transitioned.
It just transitioned, so, but how are your numbers running in terms of what your original budget projections are?
So far, we're on track for budget. It's still early in the year, but we're on track.
Okay. Can I address that?
Larry?
I'd like to respond to that myself. As in both of those letters I handed out, both of those people emphasized strongly you can't compare a road and bridge or airport environment to a landfill environment or a typical construction environment. It's apples and oranges. Nobody in this room, nobody except one person in the whole state has any experience with C&D grinding and the impacts and the cost to do that. I'm the only one that does it. I'm one of very few that does it in the whole country. And I have 2 machines. So they do not know, and they're trying to work out their model, which is a good model of airport and that, but it doesn't apply here. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's the point my experts are trying to make. That's the point David made when he talked last time. It's apples and oranges.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Well, I
Patty?
think what our staff is trying to do, though, is they took those models from the airport and road and bridge and then brought into consideration the usage, the difference in the usage, the exposure, the weather, the dust at the landfill versus road and bridge and the airport is what I'm getting out of it. I'm getting out of it that they took that into consideration when they came up with these numbers, because unlike you, they don't have actual numbers.
Yeah,
That
and
would be
I
my-
wouldn't get into a debate about
No,
this.
I'm just
I
saying
think
that
you
that's
need
my
to hear-
understanding,
yeah.
though. I just want to clarify that.
So we need to figure out how to move forward from here. John, what would you recommend?
Well, look, there are several points that have been brought up. One of the things I want to caution the board against is we can keep coming back to these discussions again and again and again. And the more times we do that, the less likely it is you're really going to have a decision in front of you. There's really only going to be one option, that will be to go with the contractors that are ready to go. There have been some issues brought up. I just kind of want to revisit some of them. So, Michael, you had asked the question about risk earlier on, and really I think you're choosing one side of the coin or the other. When we contract with the private sector, we manage the risk on the expenditure side in the sense that you know what it's going to be. You can hold the contractor to it, and Larry's aware of that because we've had those discussions before, right?
Yes,
and
we
so
have.
you have some consistency on that side. What you gain when you bring it in-house is you take on more risk on the expenditure side because you don't, that becomes the variable. Now, when you've got a fixed expense, though, you're taking risk on the elasticity on the revenue side. So whether it's way up, and your profit, or you're down, your expenses are consistent versus, do you have the flexibility to manage those, expenses as volumes go up or down? So you're just flip side of the coin, I think, and you guys need to think about which side you're more comfortable with. Steve, you keep coming back to the depreciation questions. I've just been kind of taking notes through the conversation. I want to unpack this. We represented our estimated costs on a cash basis. So if we wanted to do depreciation, you wouldn't have that big number right up front. What you would do is you'd either straight line it or, however you want to do it.
Every year.
So yeah, so maybe if you just did a straight line on the estimated life of the project, although there's a little bit of debate about that, you might, instead of having that 3.2 million, right at the front, you'll have $345,000, let's say, and push it out through the years. It actually makes the pro forma better when you do it on a depreciation basis, because taking the negative hit in that first year with dollars that are worth more than in the 10th year, then dollars that are worth less, means that if we would have used the depreciation method, it would have made it look better. But that's not how we'd suggest doing business. We would do it on a cash basis. So, and we don't have the tax implications, which is really why the private sector would typically calculate depreciation and take that off of their tax liability. So I hope that helps answer. Like, we addressed it by putting that right up front. You know, when you start to look at information, and Larry, was this on an annual basis? I assume this was like for the last year?
As who owns it or the profitability part?
The profitability.
Try to get the best information on the internet. That's just a down and dirty.
Okay, but it's on an annual
It's not a
budgetary basis, yeah. So, guys, any one of our operations in any given year, because we, public sector operations are typically going to act on a cash basis with capital improvements and that sort of thing. So in any given year, you have some years with a loss if you have big capital, and you'll have some years, and their goal is going to be to, over a 5-year period, 10-year period, whatever, be break even. That would also be the goal. Yeah, that's typically the goal of the county, is how do we cover our closure, post-closure costs, plus having enough capital reserves in place to meet our needs, and then we set our rates that way. And I think that's actually kind of what this analysis tells me anyway, when we're looking at that. Privatization versus non-privatization. Frankly, that's the discussion we're in. As staff, we've made recommendations to privatize activities to you recently. Information technology, we privatized a portion of that, and we brought some of it in-house, you know, whether it be recycling, what have you. And we do it based on an assessment of what do we think the best bang for the buck is going to be for whoever's being served. You know, in this case, it's an enterprise fund, and it's the customers of the landfill. In other cases, it's the taxpayers. And we've come to different conclusions, right? We've come to you saying we should privatize things, and we come to you saying we shouldn't. So I'd really look on that. This isn't a privatize or not privatize discussion. It is what is in the best interest of the community going forward. You know, as far as going through the individual prices of equipment and who can get what for what I can tell you is staff based their estimates on state bid pricing, and the maintenance and replacement on state bid pricing. We'll get that. I mean, there's really no question about that. As far as useful life, yes, I do believe scrap yards and landfills and such are a different operating environment. I believe that we've, you know, to Patty's point earlier, tried to take that into account by having additional maintenance, and as well as there's opportunities, there's more flexibility to achieve economies of scale by sharing equipment between functions if you have some downtime. The real thing that you've got to look at is, regardless of whether a contractor can buy something secondhand or a little bit cheaper than what we've run, the bid is the bid, right? I mean, the bid is the bid. And so I think the price that you need to be looking at is the bottom line price, okay? As far as, you know, staff's pro forma, Larry, I looked at these numbers. I think these numbers don't take into account the fact that we're being conservative in other areas. You know, if we could go through and add numbers to any of the contractor spreadsheets, we could do, yeah, it doesn't mean a whole lot. I think what the board needs to be looking at is the county and the staff do take on complicated activities at various levels. It's not that this isn't a complicated activity. It is. There is expertise. Heartland's done a great job for us, and we appreciate that. You know, I'm happy to say that publicly. Do I think that it is a more unique or complex task than other areas where we've endeavored to either take items in-house and run them and come up to speed and do them. Frankly, I don't. I do think this is something that staff can take on. Does the board take a little bit more risk on the expenditure side, as far as what we're estimating, than if we contract with one of these 3 vendors? Yes. Do we also take on the responsibility and ability to flex our operations more should our revenue streams change as we go through recessions or growth spurts? Absolutely. I think Summit County, it sounds like they experienced that a little bit. I am comfortable after diving into this and hearing what I've heard that staff can meet this pro forma within a reasonable margin, plus or minus, that it is still significantly to the financial benefit of the county. And that's why staff has made this recommendation to the board to say, look, we're just seeing a big margin here that we believe is something we need to bring to your attention and bring this policy decision to you. So at this point, I think it would be good for the board to kind of decompress as far as what kind of additional questions do you have. If you need another work session, we can certainly bring that back, but I think we need to make that work session a final decision point if you're not prepared to make one today.
Rachel.
Yeah, I was just going to ask John, and you've kind of said it in a long way, but just directly, is there anything that you've heard that's been questioning this proposal, either at the previous meeting or this one, that would make you recommend that, no, we should not go forward with Pickens County taking the program in-house?
No, the only thing that I did go back and talk to staff about was the equipment side, because I do agree, this is not your standard operating. And we have some economies of scale because we have the same equipment in other operations, and you can mix and match to extend that life, as well as the additional maintenance costs that we've included above and beyond what we already have experience with. I felt like we were within.
Okay, so as our manager, who I trust very much, you are still recommending the staff recommendation, which was to deny the other bidders and to take the program in-house?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Michael.
John, aside from the dollars, what are the other factors that would benefit the county by? Aren't there other factors? I mean, the bid form sort of said that. So what are the other factors?
You tend to have more agility to respond to whatever needs or programs that the board might identify at the landfill without having to go through an adjustment to a contract or a change in the scope of service. I think like I said before, it gives you that flexibility to manage to whatever circumstances you find yourself in, and that could be increasing costs if volumes go up, or decreasing your costs if volumes and revenues go down. I think, as you heard from Summit County, what they found is they gained, and Larry alluded to this too, and that's a balance point between whether you think 2 eyes or 1 eyes. I think, Summit County's experience and their story was that, hey, we became much more aware of, because we were on the ground doing the work and had that, operating experience at the landfill. It made us aware of things that we should have been doing that maybe we weren't doing because there wasn't that kind of organizational connection. And what I heard from Summit County is they feel like they're managing both their long-term risks and the expectations of their community a little bit better by having that kind of connection.
So will we be able to do that?
I would assume so.
Assume, or you're more comfortable with it?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that is a natural outcome when you have that kind of relationship, yeah.
So John, what's the, moving forward procedurally?
So
We
procedurally,
have to have in a regular meeting, have approve something?
so what the formal steps would be is to give staff direction to prepare. It's really a budget supplemental at this point. The bid process is kind of an administrative process at that point to reject the bids. We made a commitment to bring that forward to you, so we did. Then the formal decision from the board really comes in the form of a budget supplemental, which would be creating the positions and appropriating the funds to purchase the equipment.
So where's the direction of the board?
Yeah, what's the sense of, Larry, it's up,
We need- yeah.
it's our decision now, we need to.
Well, I'm ready to move forward and have staff bring back a supplemental budget. I think we've answered a lot of questions, a lot of good information that Larry has provided us, which I thank you for. And from Summit County, thank you again for coming over. I think we've really learned a lot, and I think, the idea of bringing it back to the board in a yearly next year to see how things are, 2017 it would be, to see how things are going, and we can move from there.
George.
Yeah, I just go back to Michael's earlier question, and I had that written down too. What are the risks versus the rewards? And I think having these last two discussions, I think we've, at least in my mind, we've addressed the risk. There's always a risk in terms of setting up a new enterprise, and certainly we took a risk when we set up IT most recently, and that was a huge supplemental budget request. It may be a little too early to see how that plays out, but I think
so far so good.
I'm being optimistic on that. So to say that we shouldn't go out and see whether we can do a better job, be more efficient, more effective with our dollars, I think that's really our charge. And so there is always a risk, but having looked at the success that Jonah's department has done with Fleet, which has been very successful, not only in terms of taking care of their own equipment, but it's actually contracted out based on requests for other organizations, Aspen Fire District, Snowmass. I mean, they've seen that Jonah and his department is able to take on those responsibilities. Likewise, I think finance. I think finance, when they put together and work with staff on this pro forma, just like they do with any of the departments, I think we have a professional staff that drills down and is able to really look at what are the risks and what's the potential. So let's see. I think the rewards, again, even if we're off by 10% or 15%, there's still over $2 million margin here. That's a huge margin. I can't believe we're not going to be within that for a budget. Having the flexibility, I think, is a reward for the county. Being able to not only move staff around more effectively and efficiently, but also perhaps the equipment during the off times when the landfill doesn't need something, road and bridge could need something, or the airport. So for me, the rewards outweigh the risks. I think our staff has shown the ability to drill down on whenever we ask them to do something. Housing is sort of a good example. We struggled for years to try to make a decision on how we would start to spend our housing funds. And we were really just kind of, we were just stuck. Staff went out and started to do some good research, brought us some proposals, got us thinking. From there, we ended up hiring a realtor to help us, and we actually have substantially moved that housing program forward. In the last 3-4 years, we were stuck. So at some point, you have to sort of have faith in the staff, which I do. Look at the pro forma. The pro forma shows that there's a substantial savings in money, and knowing that we've got the backup with our departments to handle this. So I support moving this forward.
I thought of that same thing, George, on the 2.4 million. We could be off by 2.4 million and still we could come out at a break-even point with the the low bidder price on this. Of course, that's over a 10-year period. We have to realize not a 1-year thing, but so at the supplemental time, I mean, to me, there's still a couple unanswered questions that maybe the staff could respond to, but we could still move it forward to the supplemental request, and they could still respond to questions, because we would.
Absolutely.
That's when we would make the final decision at that point anyhow.
What are those questions?
Well, I think some of these questions Larry brought up about the, how many, his actual figures are different on the annual hours of operation on some of the equipment. Much more hours than we projected, therefore he projected a lower, faster replacement schedule. And I think that's, I think we need to consider that, and, that would be something that Brian or Jonah or Kathy could, maybe try to chew on those figures a little and respond to that at the time of the supplemental budget request.
So, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
So, on Larry's sheet, you'd have staff come back and address those highlighted yellow areas, the service lifespan of the equipment. Is that what you're looking for? I just want to make sure that staff knows what they need to bring back.
The annual hours per units column. He has
those
more.
highlighted yellows.
Steve, I quite frankly don't see where that question gets us, because it's just a matter of opinion. I mean, Larry has experience, our staff has experience. How do you answer that question? Do you divide their experience? Do you put it in the middle? What do you do? So, is it going to change my trust of staff? I don't think so. So I don't see why we would consider it that. That's what we've been doing here today. I mean, explain to me why we would need to consider that question. It doesn't hold me up at all from making a decision about this. I mean, you can answer it, or the rest of the commissioners can answer it, but I don't know why we're making that a pivot point here.
Rachel?
I can see asking to say if between our projected hours and the Heartline, as he has said, hours, and say, okay, split the difference. You're saying, right, you have to pick something and saying, well, what would this do to our financial saving projections if this number was different? And you can consider that. But they are projections, and I'm willing to move forward with this proposal as well. I think there's a lot of intangibles that we're not going to be able to put a dollar on, and that is, to me, the responsiveness of that landfill to programs we may want to initiate in the future, and to have that sort of control and management abilities. So I don't know how you put a price tag on that, or even I don't want to act on perhaps what are more substantial given numbers, such as machine replacement, and ignore the other risks of, well, we'd be stuck in a contract with a certain fixed price, even if the economy drops off by 40% again, and we're not doing that volume there again, and we're not getting the revenues there again, and we could do that sort of scenario. We could plan the scenario that says, well, what if we go with Heartland, and then we have 3 years of down revenues, and how much does that cost us? So I think we could invent a lot of different scenarios, and there's this range of possibilities, quite honestly, and we have to kind of use our best instincts, our best knowledge, and we've asked some tough questions, and for the manager to continue to look at that element, I'm okay with that, bring it back to us, but it's not the only factor that I think weighs
Well-
into the decisions.
And one intangible I thought of was just the challenge and the respect for the staff. To have multiple people learning a bigger operation that would be exciting for them and a learning experience for the staff. And it could make us more flexible, actually, having more people, even though they're not running the equipment all day, every day. And then if somebody can't be there, you have somebody else who is trained in that and has experience in it. So that would be one intangible thing that I think would be valuable.
So again, I'm ready to move it forward. I think Patty and George and Michael, was your impression?
Yeah, I'm ready to move it forward. You know, it's an intangible risk. I can take that risk because I know who I need to talk to.
He's looking
Right,
right
John?
at you.
And I'm hearing you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think that's set then, so thank you, everybody, for coming and for your consideration.
I give a paper out to the county commissioners since I didn't get my 4 minutes.
Okay.
This is what I would have said. And it hasn't to do with numbers.
Grammar correct?
Thank you.
My grammar is great and I do more than grammar.
A lot more. So we were going to take a 15-minute break.
Yeah, now Rachel, you had some paperwork stuff you needed.
Well, I just said we're scheduled for a break
Uh,
that was going to be 15 minutes, and I at least need 10 to go to my bank and back.
Okay,
10?
let's do that, and then we'll come back, and I don't think it'll take us too much longer, but that'll give
us to our referral agencies.
Okay, welcome back to the
I know it's difficult, but
I'm just
that's,
going to move over here because of the presentation.
work session on May 12th.
Sorry, right by the camera.
We have a facilities update next.
And I'm not Jody.
And Jody, you've changed, you got her.
How about those tennies that she wears?
Jody's happily on vacation, and so Dave is here to give the facilities update, and we thought we'd spend a little bit of time today responding specifically, Rachel, to the question that you raised about, hey, can I just get an update on where we are in the timelines and everything that's going on, because we have so much in the hopper right now, and so we've tried to simplify it by the projects, and we'll also get whatever other updates Dave has about what's going on.
Yeah.
So Dave, could you introduce yourself for the record?
Dave Detweiler, I'm a project manager with the facilities group.
Thank you.
So I work for Jody. By all means, just yell if you have questions as I'm kind of steamrolling through, because I know you've been here a long time. So big projects. Library is the one that's obviously under construction next door. Quick little rehab of the scope. It's 4,000 foot addition, little over 30,000 feet being remodeled. The budget, you've been updated on budget before, and I know you've heard some of the concerns about where the projected costs were versus the budget. You'll see that the funds available and the projected final cost line up. The reason is we are redesigning the renovation work so that it fits under the available funding that we have. Now we know that that's a moving target as we do some fundraising, and there's certainly a lot of things that we hope to do based on fundraising goals and stuff that's coming in, but we're always going to keep those two aligned so that we never get to the point where we're building something that we can't afford. I hope that makes sense. It's not trying to play tricks with the numbers, it's just saying, yeah, our aspirations are higher than our current.
Are there any items that could be added on later if more funds are raised?
Yeah.
Without having to deconstruct a bunch of stuff?
Correct. So what we did is in the renovation, because the addition was already under contract going full speed ahead. When the renovation came back in with projected costs higher than what we thought we could accommodate, we kind of divided into two pieces. The minimum base that we had to do, which was finish the children's room, some of the repair type pieces, some of the infrastructure pieces that would allow us in the future to expand and grow. We've got that piece pinned down. Now we're taking the rest of the work and doing it kind of a la carte fashion. Hey, we can do these 6 things now. These 4 could get implemented in the future without disruption of any magnitude to customers or employees or both. So we're trying to be smart about those things, that the big impact happens now, but in the future we could layer in pieces.
Okay. And move-in date next January.
Yeah.
Is that still on track?
The one piece, so that what you'll see there is the addition construction is finishing up the end of October, and I hope this format works, and if it doesn't, feel free to tell me that you'd like something different. I have lots of tools. The addition is fairly well under control from our end. Once the Galena Plaza stuff kind of finishes our overlay. That'll be done the end of October. The renovation work, we're taking our estimate here as to the scope we think we'll be able to implement. That design is still ongoing right now. So we're not exact, but it should be around this end of the year and then move back. We move out on the 2nd is when the move starts out to the old powerhouse. That'll take 3 days. And then first of the year we'll be back in. Again, it may be a little sooner. If that renovation work, the scope that we dial in just doesn't take that long, it'll move up. And we should know that in about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, when we get all the subcontractors bought into what that final scope is.
Rachel?
Yeah, the only comment I'd really kind of made at the last meeting, and it doesn't have to be answered today, but wondering when would they get the elevator and the parking garage working again?
So 2 things. There's 2 elevators. So the one on the library side, they both got water and dirt in them from all the rain that we've had and the construction operations happening. It was just a tough one. On our side, we were out there today getting it cleaned. We've got the elevator folks coming out, and ours is just kind of a cleanup on the library side. The other one, I just left a meeting. They have to replace some parts that have been fried. Those parts are probably 2 weeks out, and then a week or so for them to get it back up and running. They also are having a conversation about, is it better to replace the elevator than just
Entirely.
fix it?
Right.
The city's working on that. I left a meeting right before I came here.
Okay, thank you. What my concern was is that I've known some people who were wheelchair bound, and that was kind of how they would get down to the lower Rio Grande. And similar to when we did talk to Jody a couple weeks ago, to the extent there's a ability to post small directional signs of where people can go, either to access the library or now to access the powerhouse, or, you know, this is where the handicapped access would be. And, you know, it'd be nice if one of the two elevators is working at any given time, but I
Yep.
realize it might not be perfect. So.
Yeah, I think ours should be back online any day, the one on the library side.
But again, after we move out of the library, I'm not sure that they'll be wanting to have that available to people, and so just to see if we can work with the overlap.
Yep. I know it's an important item for the city. It was a hot topic at the meeting I just left, so they're not ignoring it.
Okay.
They're just trying to get all the parts and pieces here and get
Makes
it
sense.
fixed.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on library? We're still not done with permits, but we're working. So the next project is the Sheriff and County Administration project. So one thing I want to confirm about the scope, if you remember when we presented to you, we had some options about how that might sequence, and what we all gravitated to at that point was a concurrent construction of the new addition to the courthouse plaza at the same time that we're gutting and remodeling the courthouse plaza. They're happening at the same time. I know that's been a point of confusion for some employees, and we're already working on a better way to communicate that down to make sure folks really are dialed in with what the plan is. That is currently, we've started our design process. We hired Bill Poss Associates here in town, a local architect. They've got an out-of-town sort of national entity that's helping with the programming, that's done a lot of public safety, sheriff, admin type projects. We're in the middle of that. The first schematic designs will be coming out this summer, with the end of that schematic design being in August. So we've got some public outreach components during that time period to make sure that we're listening to the public, we're incorporating what we hear into that schematic design, and at the end we'll kind of do a confirmation, hey, did we hear you? And you guys will be a part of that.
And prior to that, so June 3rd, we're going to be kind of launching our pre-outreach, where Joey and I are going to host either we haven't decided if it's going to be lunch. Pat thinks we'll get more attendance at a lunch versus maybe in the evening, but on June 3rd to kind of do a tour of the facility, talk to the community about some of the things that are important for them. We'll also be using the Pick and Connect tool like we use for the airport, and we've got a video that should be coming out, and we'll be doing outreach there. And you guys will be seeing the guidelines that come out of this study committee to make sure they're in line with your expectations and values as you've expressed them to us in these projects.
I have a question. What's the square footage of this building?
This is 18,000, just under 18,000.
So with the addition, we're kind of looking at plus or minus doubling of the size. So people keep asking, how big are you going to go?
Yep.
Okay.
That's about how big. Yep.
Okay.
And that's 18,000 really usable space here.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about 4,000 really usable space.
Once everything's blown out, at least it's a clean slate to start with.
How fun.
So again, that design work is gonna go through next spring, and then we'll start construction in April is what our current plan is. Should be about a 12-month construction project. We'll dial that in as we get a little better understanding of some of our foundation issues and that sort of stuff. But we are continuing the dialogue with the city folks just to make sure that their plans of what they're building, we're keeping that dialogue open about any opportunities. Right now, the current conversation is focusing on the garage level, that their garage on Zupanzis probably can tie in with our garage on our property and provide both of our law enforcement people with another exiting point, which is always nice. So that conversation is continuing. There's not a whole lot of programmatic overlap, but.
Can you tell me, do you know, I mean, it's a city project, but are they planning on maintaining the historic house there, or are they starting to talk about moving that off the site? The shed?
I don't know the details. I know they are keenly aware of the historic nature of those, and I know in the past that has been a topic of...
Okay, so they haven't come to any new conclusions?
No, I think they've still got several options that they're considering.
Okay.
Right now, the building that I'm seeing from them that's starting to generate traction on Zupanzis really fronts on Main Street and extends down to share a wall with ours. So that if in the future APD and sheriff needed to be able to go back and forth a little easier, we're seeing if that connection makes any sense without causing more problems than it creates. But we're both going to build to the property line anyway, so the walls will be right there.
So why not put a door in?
Yeah, why not look and just see? I mean, it creates code issues, it creates some logistic issues, but it may solve a bunch.
Okay. Thank you.
On the moving plaza to temporary locations, I know that John's mentioned that a couple times, and I know you don't have answers yet, but if we could have those, when you do have stuff lined up, I'm sure you'll let us know. But
We can't wait to see them either, Steve.
Where
We're
are
working
we
on
going?
those.
Yeah, we're working on a matrix of sorts that says, here's the different ways we could place various departments in different options with different cost points and different pros and cons. It's not easy. Part of it may be a request from our standpoint to lock into some lease sooner rather than later so that we have it, even though we may not need it for a bit. So we're working on that. It's not an easy undertaking. And our option, that is still the preferred option. There's lots of benefits to that. We understand that if that just doesn't come together in a way that works for you all, there are other options in terms of that sequence that we could fall back on. But right now, we don't like those as much as we like this.
for instance, you could build that, we could move everybody from here into there,
Disaster.
and then they have to suffer through all the construction right next door the whole time.
And we think that ends up being more costly, even though some of these rents on these spaces are gonna look like a big number, that moving in and then moving back and having the space configured one way for the temp occupancy and then another way for the permanent occupancy, we still believe we'll spend more doing that than this town.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
It was of importance for me, having been an election judge with the county a couple times in the last 4 years, that we really start thinking about our election needs, because we have this big election coming up. At the same time, we're doing this. So I think that's already in the works. I just want to make sure that we weren't missing out on that.
That is on our radar screen.
Thank you much.
That'll be a top
Appreciate that.
priority.
Yeah. Any other questions on that project?
We got a lot of things going on in the airport's not even on.
Yeah, I didn't put that one on because I wasn't sure
I would've been-
exactly. We can talk about it because I certainly know you can answer.
Don't want to get
questions
bored.
about that one. So the next one in the sequence here is the courthouse remodel. So the intention is, after we all have completed this project and after and only after the city has found a new home for the APD. Then we would remodel the courthouse so that it functions purely for courts, DA, and probation. If not for the fact that it was historic structure on the inside, on a pure square foot basis, that building meets all of their needs for the long term. Unfortunately, because of the way it's built, it's a little tougher to work in. But we've met with them, we've started that programming effort just to be sure that we're all comfortable that that is, we know it's the desired solution on their part and our part. We just want to make sure we've got that dialed in. So we've started on that preliminary stuff, and that's all we're going to do now is just make sure we're not into something more than we expect. But that would happen starting in fall of 17, and that's the trigger there is just that's when we think APD and the sheriff would both be out of there. But again, if they're not ready to be out, we'll all
Adjust.
Yeah. That make sense?
Yeah.
And that $1.3 million on the number, that was just in the last budget. That's not, I still don't think we're looking at spending that much money to do the things that we need to do. It was just the conglomeration of the budget items we had projected. The ambulance barn. So that's, they passed an election, they have some funding. We are currently and have been working at finding a location for this new ambulance barn. We have a number of things that are percolating. Most of that conversation with the JOC is around sites at the hospital location, seeing if we can make something work there.
JOC?
That is the Joint Operating Committee, which is really Phyllis, myself, and the CEO of the hospital, along with the ambulance director. We wanted an acronym. They're the jocks.
But
Yeah.
I know Rachel's going to go, but can I just ask real quick, is the current site out of the picture, out of the question now, or?
It's not out of the question. One of the things it's hard, the current ambulance barn.
I was just up there and.
Yeah, it's stuck. It's got, the back is a retaining wall.
Beautiful, the wall.
Is there physical room to push that wall farther into the corner of the lot, kind of the way those stone walls are on either side? Yes, there to the corner of the lot, there is a lot of room. It would fairly well take out that whole grove of trees that sits right behind.
Between there and Meadowwood.
Yeah. So while it is physically an option, it may not be the preferred way to go.
We can't just make the garage bay doors bigger or the ambulances smaller. I know that's the issue, is you can't get the truck in the barn.
Yeah. We're trying to accommodate, there's, I think, two things, is having the full fleet available there, and prior to the construction project taking place at the hospital, we actually had a temporary tent that was housing two of the ambulances, and that had to be heated because of the nature of the medicines, equipment,
Right.
and what have you that are in there. That's above my level of understanding, but so we didn't have the room to expand. Even if we got smaller ambulances, we still need to find room for two more. And there were some design changes, I think, with the hospital project, and then the retaining wall. Could we physically do it? Yes. Do we think that is going to be the best option for our neighbors? We don't really know yet. We're still evaluating that, but as Dave said, because of how far back we think we need to go to get that footprint, we want to look at other alternatives, and so we're doing that.
Interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. The other thing I wanted to make sure that we were somehow incorporating into the ambulance barn project and discussion, which came up during the election, was whether there were partnerships that would be possible with, say, Aspen Fire District, that they had built more bays than they needed to in anticipation of perhaps working with an ambulance service, but there were issues with that too in terms of a paid staff and all volunteer staff, and where do people sleep, and those sort of things. But are those conversations ongoing? Are we going to fully examine that before we decide we need to build a new building, or what size new building we need to build?
That's the merging of the ambulance district with the fire district, or we're not sure about that? I'm just wondering, that was a question that had been brought up.
I think they're different questions. Yes, all of those have been brought up. I think what we're talking about, is there an opportunity to do co-location that would be beneficial?
Keep the departments fundamentally separate, but the site facility.
Or at least keep the discussion separate. I think the facilities question can be a separate discussion from the district.
Okay, as long as we're fully investigating it, and so that is kind of part of site selection, and we'll have that fully vetted before we would need to start to expend any money on design.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We are open if anybody knows of a
No, I'm thinking of
value-priced piece of ground somewhere from the hospital in.
Yeah, there's one out by Dotsero or something.
Yeah, that's about the closest one we've found so far.
It might hurt our response times.
Yeah, a bit.
So the timeline component there, it's just a guess until we figure out where we're going. The design and construction is probably about right whenever we decide this is where we're going to go. The last semi-major one, certainly isn't as big as the others, the jail ADA cell upgrade and fire sprinklers. We also had a couple of items in the budget for some plumbing fixture replacement and some flooring replacements. We're bundling all those together into one job so we can bid it at once. That should go out next month and be under construction this summer.
Tell them makes everything else look like this is.
It's a fairly easy one. Do we need to talk about the airport?
No, I was just kidding.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, any other projects that?
I like the format. I mean, it's easy to follow, and it's nice because you can kind of lay it out and go, okay, what are we doing in this year? What are we doing? You can kind of go with the flow.
At least in our facilities. We're doing a lot of infrastructure renewal and modernization really across a lot of our departments now. Facilities, you can see we've really taken that theme to heart and really trying to work those issues now on multiple fronts. Same is true when you go to information technology, or we talk about the airport, or we talk about roads, and it's a major theme for us right now that results in real projects. So we're moving on stuff. That's okay. Thanks, Dave.
That's it?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. It was nice to meet you.
Then the only other open discussion item I had for you is just to remind you that I'm going to go down and attend the RAFTA meeting on the access control plan for the Rio Grande with Dale and Brian tomorrow. John Redmond will be filling in, and I've sent those guys, John and John, so you still will have two Johns, email and the expectation for an executive session tomorrow.
I have a question, and maybe George knows. Do you know where the meeting with Cory Gardner is? Have they decided?
I haven't heard.
Yeah, stay in touch with Charlotte. She was
I
doing
will.
that RSVP.
Yeah, if I had a lot going on that day, but.
Rachel, you had an open discussion thing you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And I apologize, I left my note over here before the stream started. But I just basically wanted to make the board aware that the National Association of Counties meeting is going to be coming up in July, and so mid-July, early July. The deadline for submitting resolutions for that national body to consider is June 10th. And I had had some conversations following one of our quarterly meetings with the Forest Service about, could you give me a heads up on any upcoming federal issues you'd like me to look into when I'm at NACO, and was told that one of the things they're going to be very concerned about is the program that's currently called the Recreational Enhancement Act. And so it's the Forest Lands Recreational Enhancement Act, kind of called FLRA. And that's the program that allows a fee to be charged at the entrance to, say, Maroon Bells, and then for the local Forest Service to retain, I think, most of the revenues and reinvest it in upgraded picnic tables or campground facilities or rebuilding trails or things like that. It was kind of initiated as a pilot program, and it's going to be up for renewal in 2016. And so the July meeting of NACO will set their policy positions for the following year once this bill's already introduced. And so I just kind of wanted to update the board that I was working on a resolution to support the renewal of that program and that the Forest Service be able to retain the revenues as it has traditionally to reinvest in its properties. I'd have to double check. I think there may be a small wrinkle in it I'm not as aware of yet about being able to retain a portion of the ski area leases as well. I'm not sure if that's a new element or that's just an element that's been under threat. And we all know, I think we've read the papers, even this summer, the Forest Service is not planning on opening the Aspen Visitor Center at the corner of town because they don't have the revenues. And these constant budget cuts to the Forest Service, and if they took away this revenue source, you know, that would be a pretty significant amount of their budget. That would make it harder for them to continue to keep the campgrounds open and stuff. So, yeah, again, you're generally not supposed to submit resolutions unless your own board supports them as well. And so just wanted to let you guys know I was kind of intending to do that.
Okay.
It just reminded me of something. So, yeah, the Forest Service is going to operate out of Aspen Highlands this summer, and I had suggested to Karen that perhaps they could do staff with one person down at ACRA. And I don't know if that's come up at a discussion with ACRA, but it seems like it would make sense if they have the ability, if ACRA has the ability to help with the information desk, because that's, in terms of summer traffic.
That's a huge loss, though.
That's where the traffic is going to go versus people who are curious about Forest Service have to drive all the way up to Highlands. They may not be going up to the Bells and they have to go back up to Difficult for the campground. So anyway, it's an idea, and I haven't heard back from Karen if she's pursued that or if ACRA has the visitor center.
The ACRA is pretty cramped.
Yeah.
They're struggling in that space as it is, so it's a good idea, but I don't know if it's physically.
Never sit at the front desk.
Yeah, the one thing that struck me is that, and I don't know, I'd imagine it's working with CDOT, but the directional signs that are on Highway 82 coming in will probably need to be changed.
Oh, yeah,
or
'cause
covered.
everything
But if it
direction-
says there's, you know, lead you all the way into Forest Service information at that point, and just to get there and then find a sign on the door that says go somewhere else, that wouldn't be good. And so I don't know who we would work with on that, John, whether we would work with CDOT or Brian Pettit to evaluate the signage that leads people to the 7th and Main for Forest Service information and change it so that it leads them up to Highlands for Forest Service information. You know.
I think those are in CDOT, but we can double check
but
that.
that'll be something to get on fairly quickly because of the summer season starting soon. So that was my kind of thought on that.
I have a real quick, and I don't know, I just read it in the paper and I didn't really follow the whole article, but did anybody talk to Steve Scadron or Stacy from Carbondale about this wanting funds, this money like for coal? Did you
I
guys
didn't
see
read the
that?
article. I kind of got the impression just from the headline that they probably signed on in support of the fee and dividend. And that was the translation.
Well, there was,
I didn't get
I
that.
remember that article, and no, it didn't have to do with the fee and dividend. It had to do with the
It's like a
lease-
severance
some
tax.
severance tax or
Something
something
for
to
coal.
do with, they've been able to mine coal for a really low amount per ton forever.
Oh, so it's what the taxes actually are.
Yeah, but it was interesting because City of Aspen was hoping to get some funds through there, and I'm like, unless there's coal mines in the city limits that I don't know about, I don't. So you guys aren't aware of it either? Okay. I just
So
didn't know
it's
if anybody
similar
else
to
had.
the severance tax for oil and gas, but it's somehow
Yeah.
different than that too.
I just didn't know if anybody had been in that
Different
loop.
So just one more note, you guys received a letter from Western State Colorado University. They're doing their water, the water workshop, which we've sponsored each year.
In July, is that in July?
Well, it was
It's
in
actually,
June this year.
it's earlier,
Last
it's June 24th and 26th, so I just wanted to be sure you took a look at that. Typically, the board,
I didn't get that either.
It must have just come in because I didn't.
I think it just came in, so Well, it says May 8th here, so.
I haven't seen a copy of.
Well, I'll double
email.
check and make sure it's gotten out to you guys, but typically what we've done is provided a sponsorship out of your.
At
you know,
$500
Yeah.
out of
And
Healthy
then,
Rivers.
yeah, then you've had a complimentary, so we'll probably bring that request forward again, but since it's coming up a little bit earlier, just want to make sure
Yeah.
your attention was
That's
on
the
that.
weekend
Patty,
everybody's
just so you know, I went last year, and I think George went the year before.
Is it good?
It was an excellent conference.
But it's when
and,
everybody's gonna be out of town.
I
though.
won't be able to go this year, because I'm gonna be still in Washington and then
Right,
coming.
Michael's gonna be gone.
It conflicts with
back.
our regular meeting on the 24th, so, not likely. But in the past, some of the Healthy Rivers and Stream board
Yeah.
members still take advantage of
Yeah,
that.
well, send me the info and I'll look it up, because maybe there's something good on the Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday,
Okay.
or whatever it is.
We'll make sure you get that.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I'm done.
Tomorrow
I
noon?
think we're all done and packed up and
We're
heading
all-
out the door. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you
Thanks,
tomorrow at
Grassroots.
noon for the regular meeting.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Grassroots.
Jonathan
And thank
Wilson
you,
said the
guys.
one
I know
thing-
that was.